House bills on first reading. Senator Steinmetz, after you told me to pay attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pay attention. No, Mr. President, I would request that House Bill 145, Disclosure of Sensitive Information Law Enforcement, be referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary.
Without objection, so ordered. House bills on first reading. House Bill 52, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 52, Revisers Bill, sponsored by the Management Council, passed the House, ayes 60, excused 2.
House Bill 52 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. House Bill 286, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 286 engrossed, ETS consolidation, sponsored by Representative Nicholas, passed the House, ayes 40, noes 21, excused 1.
House Bill 286 referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. House Bill 100, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 100 engrossed, Acquisition Value Study, sponsored by Representative Jennings, passed the House, ayes 58, noes 2, excused 2.
House Bill 100 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. House Bill 213, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 213 engrossed, Energy Production Inventory Exemption, sponsored by Representative Burkhart, passed the House, ayes 59, noes 2, excused 1.
House Bill 213 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. House Bill 229, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 229, Electronic Payment of Sales and Use Taxes, sponsored by Representative Larson, passed the House, ayes 61, excused 1.
House Bill 229 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. House Bill 25, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 25, School Capital Construction Transfers and Distributions, sponsored by the School Facilities Committee, passed the House, ayes 37, noes 24, excused 1.
House Bill 25 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. House Bill 27, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 27, School Facilities Consolidated Remediation Schedule, sponsored by the School Facilities Committee, passed the House, ayes 59, noes 1, excused 2.
House Bill 27 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. House Bill 180, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 180 engrossed, Brucellosis Testing Notification Requirements, sponsored by Representative Davis, passed the House, ayes 61, excused 1.
House Bill 180 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. House Bill 123, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 123, Collection of Antler or Horns by Residents and Non-Residents, sponsored by Representative Berger, passed the House, ayes 48, noes 13, excused 1.
House Bill 123 is referred to Committee Number 6, Travel. House Bill 239, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 239, Vehicle Idling Decriminalization, sponsored by Representative Singh, passed the House, ayes 59, noes 2, excused 1.
House Bill 239 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. House Bill 127, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 127, Healthcare Facilities and Clergy, sponsored by Representative Angelos, passed the House, ayes 60, noes 1, excused 1.
House Bill 127 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. House Bill 140, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 140, Mental Health Care Access Collaborative Care Model, sponsored by Representative Zwanitzer, passed the House, ayes 40, noes 21, excused 1.
House Bill 140 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. House Bill 165, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 165, Living Organ Donor Protection, sponsored by Representative O'Hearn, passed the House, ayes 61, excused 1.
House Bill 165 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. Reports from standing committees.
February 7, 2023. Mr. President, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 18, engrossed, Missing Person Alert Systems, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman. February 6, 2023, Mr. President, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 41, engrossed, Lightweight Trailers Permanent Registration. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brendan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman. February 7, 2023, Mr. President, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 19, State Indian Child Welfare Act Task Force. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Nethercott, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 7, 2023, Mr. President, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 185, engrossed, Local Government Distributions Revisions. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Nethercott, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 7, 2023, Mr. President, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 47, engrossed, Election Equipment Federal Certification. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman. February 7, 2023, Mr. President, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 61, engrossed, Source material associated with mining agreement. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Nethercott, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Bill's on second reading. Second reading of Senate File 146.
Senate File 146, State-Funded Capital Construction, an act relating to state-funded capital construction, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee. It was referred, moment please, to Committee number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Nethercott. No, Senator Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
There are amendments. Could we have the amendments read in? First one.
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 1. Section 67, Capital Construction Projects. Page 10, line 21, in.
Senator Kinski, amendment number 1 on Senate File 146.
Mr. President, we're waiting for a rewrite on this amendment, on amendment number 1.
Ellen, can we move on
No,
to number 2?
the corrected copy has not yet been issued to the floor, Mr. President. It's being numbered.
Could we have
now.
the second amendment read in, please? We'll lay that one back.
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 2, corrected copy. Section 7, Economic Development. Page 12, lines 22 and 23, delete.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, and I have actually got 3 second reading amendments, and what I'd like to do, Mr. President, is kind of take them out of order. I think it'll make more sense to the body, and what I'd like to do is have second reading amendment number 4 read in.
You guys are testing my humor. Randy, could we read in second reading amendment number 4, please?
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 4, Section 7, page 13, line 11, delete.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 4, the Senate File 146, and would ask for your favorable consideration. Members of the body, this goes into line page 13 on line 11, and then it brings in the same language on, and that specific project deals with a community recreation center. And then on page 15, line 19, that deals with the infrastructure related to a special events in a rodeo ground that has a capacity of over 7,500, Mr. Chairman. Just brings in the language and says that, that they can't use, it's got to be other non-state funds for the purposes of the matching funds. But Mr. Chairman, there was a question yesterday that I didn't get answered from my colleague from Laramie County, and the question was, how come I keep bringing this back up when I know the answer to the question? And Mr. President, my colleague was correct. I do know the answer to the question. The trouble is there's about 23 or 24 of you out here that have never served on appropriations that know what the answer to the question is. And so the answer to the question is let me walk you through the process. The governor submits a budget. That budget goes to the Joint Appropriations Committee. They bring in on a regular budget, they bring in every agency, go through those budgets. They go through the governor's letters. They go through the Secretary of State's letters. They go through all the top 5 letters. We come in and we look at CapCon and we do that. And then they go through and then they come back a period later and they go through what they call budget markup. So that's when they actually mark up the governor's budget, make all the amendments and stuff. And then the 4 years that I had the pleasure and the opportunity to serve on your Appropriations Committee, one of the most repugnant things that I've ever seen in this body happened my first year, Mr. President. And so typically, once you get the budget drafted up, you go through it, you look at it, then the Joint Appropriations Committee goes back and they do what we call a round robin. And Mr. President, this is where I become dismayed a little bit with the process, because we'd already gone through errors and omissions, we'd cleaned up those, resolved those issues, and so as a freshman member, I went in there was a round robin. And what a round robin is, so you all know, is members of the Appropriations Committee then get to choose a project that's important to their community. Not necessarily one that has been vetted through any process, wasn't in the governor's recommendation, wasn't in the agency's profile. And so members of the Appropriations Committee, and I'll be honest, Mr. President, the Senate's been pretty disciplined about not doing this, but the budget is a makeup of 7 members from the House and 5 members from the Senate. We've had the last couple of years, we strip those off, bring it back to what we agreed on. But Mr. Chairman, so what we have here in this particular amendment, these are earmarks. Mr. Chairman, we as a body can choose to be very disciplined, and we can run these through the process. We can take these out and say, we're not going to allow earmarks in the Senate, Mr. Chairman. But if we don't want to do that, the other alternative is that I would propose to you, I think every member of this legislature deserves an opportunity, just like the members of the Appropriations Committee, to pick a project that's important to your community. And Mr. President, I think we ought to have a 3rd reading round robin. I would encourage, I look at this and I look at my friend over here from Fremont County, and I spent some time up that glorious facility, and that we have Sinks Canyon up there, and I was up there and I thought, that building could use a little restoration, the road's a little narrow in a place, and I thought, I'm pretty sure that we could probably find $2 to $3 million to help that facility in Sinks Canyon. I look at my colleague over here, represents Sublette County. It's the only county in the state that doesn't have a hospital. They operate on a rural health care clinic, I'm absolutely convinced we can probably find some purpose in his community, Mr. Chairman, that would help that rural health care clinic. And then my colleague over here from Lincoln County, who keeps reminding us, I'm sure that if we put $4 or $5 million in the budget for WIDOC to build employee housing, that would help, Mr. Chairman. And my colleague from Sheridan that represents little bitty towns, I know they need a swimming pool in one of those towns, Mr. Chairman. I think that we ought to appropriate money for that swimming pool. And my colleague from
30
Park
seconds.
County, Mr. President.
30 seconds left. Senator Steinmetz. Senator Dockstader, would you come forward?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move to divide the amendment. Okay, I would ask to divide the amendment. Thank you to my good colleague who knows the rules so well. I would ask to divide the amendment. Lines 1 through 2 would be division number 1, and lines 3 through 5 would be division number 2. And-
Repeat that, please, so everybody has it in front of them.
Okay, so we're on the amendment number 4, just so everybody remembers, we have quite a stack. And so the first division would be lines 1 and 2, and the second division would be lines 3 through 5.
Okay, everybody has that. Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. President, I just believe these are two different projects and we should have debate on each one. And so
Thank you.
with
Chair
that-
determines it divisible. Go ahead and start with the first one. On the first one, Senator Hicks.
For my first time on Division 1,
Okay,
Mr. President, let's see if we can pick up where we left off. No, the pool. So my colleague from the east part of Park County up there, they really need they've been working for years trying to get an updated senior facility that integrates with their assisted living facility. I'm sure that if we could just find $4 or $5 million in the budget for that facility, Mr. Chairman, they'd be more than willing to match that to address the needs of those senior citizens. I look at my colleague from Uintah County, and I've had the opportunity to walk that beautiful park down there along the Bear River. But you know, there's some pavements that's cracking on high priority days that the parking lot's a little bit crowded. They could really use some signage, because we know if we drive people off of that interstate down there, they're gonna spend money at those other businesses. So I'm pretty sure that we could find $4 or $5 million to help out that community.
Mr.
Chairman. And my colleague from
you are
Campbell,
on Division 1, correct?
yeah, on Division 1, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Well, my colleague from Campbell County, they have this Camplex up there. It's a phenomenal facility. And if we could just do some renovations there to the pens and have an opportunity to bring in larger facilities and more organization and attract people. And then I got my other friend from Park County here. What would we do if we could extend that airport? What would we do for the tourist industry up there to bring in larger jets? Can we not find some money here for a project in Park County, Mr. Chairman? Sweetwater County, they want to build and enlarge a water pipeline out to their airport so they can bring in heavy industry and an industrial park and bring in more businesses for that community. Surely we should earmark $5 million for Sweetwater County, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think you get the point.
Understood.
This is why we don't earmark projects, Mr. Chairman.
Understood. On
So,
Division 1.
But, you know, Mr. Chairman, we can either, on a Division 1, I would ask for your favorable consideration, Mr. Chairman. Vote it up, vote it down. We'll get to the next couple amendments, Mr. Chairman. And we can dispose of those, but this just wants to bring this attention to you as how these projects just happen to show up in the CapCon and the budget. And Mr. Chairman, I really think maybe we should do a round robin here in the Senate. I think it would be an excellent idea. On and for Division 1.
Division 1, do you want to go back to, let's have the president speak, and then we'll come back to the sponsor for the original division. Go ahead, Senator Driscoll, President Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great argument. I like it. We have a round robin, folks. Guess who did one on Committee of the Whole? I did one, and any of you can do it that want to. If you have a project you think's worthy, you can bring it, and this body will react to that, and they'll decide whether it's good or bad. The argument you just heard is only let the Appropriations Committee decide what should be in these bills. That's not how this process works. They bring the bill to us, we look at it. By amendment, you take out what you don't like in it, and you add what you'd like to see. And the debates on the floor are what drives that. We all look at the project. It could be an airport up in your area, Mr. President. It could be a rodeo ground somewhere else. It could be a chunk of highway. We've all done this. I've seen it happen over and over again. And this body does a voice vote, and they decide if the project has merit for state funding or not. That is the round robin. And you folks have the ability, Committee of the Whole, second reading and third reading, to bring anything you would like to add or subtract from this. So that this amendment, the division is in order, it's right, but it's also right if someone wants to bring another one that adds something to it. So let's not get in a big Twitter about earmarks, because let's face it, other than some committee-driven stuff, the bill is projects that people have thought about. So vote them up, vote them down, but don't get in a big worry about what they are, because that's what this body does. We appropriate and spend money, and you folks are all hired to make that decision. Mr. Chairman, that's what we're here for. So for me, vote it up, vote it down. I'm not going to tell you either way. I'll get there. But I am speaking to the amendment is that this is exactly what we're here for, is this thing in general. Don't feel like it's some kind of pork or some kind of wreck when somebody brings an idea what they want, because that's what we do.
Thank you. Do you want to go back? Oh, Senator Guru? There's 10
Thank you,
minutes.
Mr.
We'll come back to you in a minute. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, just to kind of amplify a little bit on what my good friend said, you know, that's what this is about. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about what's already in here, what's already in this bill. You know, as I pointed out, some of the inflation numbers that's in there is for projects that have already been approved. One man's or one member's pork barrel is another member's needed project. Let's take a look. Northwest Community College, Powell Student Center, Northwest Community College District Sheridan Tech and Applied Science Building, Department of Corrections, Wyoming Honor Farm, DFS, Emerson Building in Lander, Fire Academy, Level 1, Level 2 concrete. These are projects that are all over the state that are in this bill right now, that we have passed over the years and that we will pass again today. Is this pork? No, there are already projects that have been approved by the Senate, by the body down the hall, and by the chief executive on the first floor as needed projects for the state of Wyoming. We're engaging in that exercise. Nothing more, nothing less. And we do it all over. We don't do it just here. We did it in the budget. We do it in Capcom. We do it in water. We do it all over the enterprise in many different forms. So I understand what the bringers, what the one speaker is trying to say, my good friend, the majority floor leader, but I have a hard time understanding. It's like, we're going to start passing out speeding tickets at the Indy 500. Okay, got it. I got it. But this is just, all this is the normal course of action. Vote it up, vote it down, bring your own, all can play. On and four. Thank you.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Past President. Well, I'd just like to say that, you know, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. We got a round robin deal going on here, and I can tell you as a member of this body, I feel disenfranchised. You can say whatever you want about it. You can categorize it however you like, but I wasn't invited. And this body wasn't invited. There's a few people that were. And I find that disenfranchising. Thank you, Mr. Past President.
Thank you. Back to the chairman and then over to Senator Scott. Go ahead, Chairman.
So I'm going to follow tight on the heels of my friend from Rock Springs. I agree, and that's why I've always opposed the earmarking process. Because it's not fair to all the other members of the body. There should be no special privilege attached to being on appropriations. I've always opposed it, so I want to make sure that we're clear on that. Our colleagues on the other side happen to disagree. That's point one. Point two, the projects to which my friend from Teton County is referring to came up to the budget through ordinary established processes. Through the Community College Commission, they have a process by which those projects are brought to the table. Through the State Construction Division, they have a process by which those projects are brought to the table. Inflation has wrought damage on them. The governor recommends an inflation adjustment. Those are all fundamentally different. Those are the parts of the CapCon bill that we need. Those are fundamentally different than an ice rink that was added on and around robin. It's different than an office building was added on and around robin. Those things are wholly and fundamentally different. And and what's great about this discussion is this is the first time I can recall where we get a full, candid, clear airing of what the difference is between what's necessary and what somebody slipped into a bill. So I don't want to lose the CAPCON. We need to have the CAPCON. I just want to make sure that we're clear between what is necessary and comes up through ordinary state processes. And you recall on first reading, somebody said, how did this get here? Did it get vetted? Did it get examined? Did we get a report on it? Those are the ones that I think are at jeopardy. The rest of the bill we need. So I just want to make that distinction, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott?
Mr. President, following on with that discussion, I think there's some deeper issues at stake here too, because if we develop the process of either a select group earmarking and being able to put in earmarks, or a larger group, we're following the precedent that has gotten, one of the things that has gotten the federal government in major trouble. And by avoiding this kind of earmarking we're starting to see here, we will keep the size of government better down within reason. And if we vote against this amendment and approve the earmarking process, we are voting to grow government. And I'm afraid this body, if we don't do something such as this amendment is suggesting, Mr. President, and put a stop to this, I'm afraid what we're doing is telling each one of us that our value to our communities as legislators is how much pork can we bring home. And that is a recipe for big government and unaltered growth in government and for needing more taxes. So very much on and for this amendment to remove these things.
Senator Steinmetz, let's go Rothfuss, Boner in that order. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this discussion. I think it's a healthy discussion for us to contemplate the process. Once again, it's probably not so clean cut what is an earmark and what is a process. You know, one of the trends I've gathered in the time that I've been in the legislature is it's an earmark if it's in your district. It went through a process if it's in my district. And I think that's true of every project I've seen come through here, is that advocates for it have reasons to advocate for it. Most all of the projects that we see that come through here, Mr. Chairman, certainly have constituencies behind them. There's good cause, there's justification. All of the folks that have spoken against the earmarking, I can probably sit and name a list of good projects that they brought to this body that some of us might count as earmarking, and others might count as good projects, and it depends a lot on what your perspective is. So the idea that we indict some of these and others are okay probably comes largely down to personal consideration. With regard to the round robin, there is two sides to that as well. The appropriations process includes a long period of weeks where things are cut, right? Not added. Apparently the adding is pork, but the cutting is unbiased and through a process. But we know, Mr. Chairman, that's not the case either, because things get cut that aren't priorities for members on the Appropriations Committee, and things don't get cut if they are priorities for members of the Appropriations Committee. We've seen that year in and year out. So there is no true purity to this political process, regrettably. There's no clean system. There's no clear right and wrong. It's a deliberative body. We all have one vote in this chamber. But I will say, Mr. Chairman, that I really liked the majority floor leader's idea of having a full round robin where we each get $5 million. So I don't want to take that off the table already. I want everyone to chew on that maybe tonight, and we can come back, talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. But we've got a lot of good projects in front of us, and I think we need to be thoughtful and deliberative and weigh them on the merits of the projects and not just worry about how they got here and who brought them and what they are, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I guess along those lines, appreciate the discussion, but we're on Committee
Division one.
We're not on number 4, right? So I was wondering if we might be able to, Division 1, I was wondering if we might have an explanation of what this particular amendment does. I don't think it has anything to do with anything that we've been talking about. So, which I appreciate the good discussion, but it seems like, if I understand it correctly, we're just simply deleting the matching funds from being any other source and saying that it needs to be non-state funds. I hope that I'm correct in understanding.
Thank you. We're going to come back to Senator. We're going to come back to Senator Steinmetz. Let her close it out. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vote aye on Division 1.
Do you want, okay.
Mr. Chairman.
The sponsor, oh,
He's the sponsor,
so you are,
yeah.
okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I remember a colleague of ours that used to sit over there just behind, and I always remember what he told me when I come down here first couple of years, and he told me, Mr. Chairman, do not trust that Appropriations Committee. Those people know too much. And it's true, Mr. Chairman, because they do know how to do earmarks. And contrary, and I don't want to get into a protracted debate, and the president's right. Anybody can bring an amendment to the bill, but everybody in here knows what it's like to go against the Appropriations Committee. Everybody knows when you come in here what it's like to have those 5 people stand up and try to kill your bill. It's a heck of a lot easier to come down here with the appropriation already in it and get it through, and especially things like a budget that's all this, and you guys, we just went through that, you know how complicated it is. It's pretty easy to slip stuff through in the 300 series or do this. It's a heck of a lot harder, Mr. President, to come down here and amend something into the budget than it is to take it out, and particularly when you're going against a committee that knows too darn much, Mr. President. So on and for the amendment, and then we'll get to the next couple, Mr. Chairman.
This is on Division 1. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. It's failed. No, it's passed. It's passed. Passed. Clerk, Chief Clerk. Yeah, no money. Thank you for the clarification on Senator Case. Floor Leader Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, all the amendment does is says where it requires a 1-to-1 matching fund, that they can't use state funds to match state funds. That's all this amendment does. The next ones are the ones that I would strongly encourage you to vote no on, but we're not there, Mr. Chairman. So on and for Division 2, that's all it does, is says you can't match state funds with state funds.
Further discussion on Division 2. Question be called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Division 2 has passed. President, you want to switch out or keep going?
Mr. Majority Floor Leader, what amendment would you like next?
Mr. President, thank you for asking. Mr. President, I move the second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 146.
I've got to
Members,
have it read in.
I have it read in at this time.
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 2, corrected copy, Section 7, Economic Development. Page
Mr.
12,
Majority.
lines 22 and 23, delete.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 146. Members of the body ask for your favorable consideration. This just goes in on page 12 and deletes entirely the section that funds a community winter recreation center. Ask for your favorable consideration.
Question being called. And we have money involved on that one. We do, I believe. There is money involved. That will be a roll call vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 146. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? No. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Murphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Pappas, excuse me, Nethercott? Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Nethercott? Excuse, Mr. President?
Excused.
Excused? President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Second reading amendment number 2, 25 aye, 5 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 146 has passed the Senate. Senator Hicks, next amendment number.
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 3, corrected copy, Section 7, Economic Development, page 14, line 20, delete.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 146 and ask for your favorable consideration. This deletes the funding for the infrastructure project related to a special event on a rodeo grounds that has a capacity of 7,500 or more.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to, I guess, a little bit more discussion on this one, because it's kind of hard to respond. I don't know how that general discussion applies to this amendment. I assume it's meant to, but this is something that I've just been aware of personally. This is a project that's been in the works for a couple years now. It's required close coordination with our friends across the highway. Actually, they're at the active Air Force Base. They're actually shutting down their golf course. Those of us who serve know you can't have an Air Force Base without a golf course, but apparently you can. Yeah, it's weird. But so it's a pretty good example, I think, of a lot of coordination between the local entities here, our federal partners across the interstate. It's something that's going to, at least has had some thought. So I'd like to draw a distinction between some of the things we heard about this being sort of something that's just thrown on at the last minute in a round robin. I don't know if that's what happened here or not. I can, just being sort of tangentially involved with this project because I was stationed there, I can tell you that this one has been worked on at least a little bit. So I'd just like to highlight that distinction here.
Dockstader, you want to come back up again? That's what I was worried about that.
Mr. President?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I will address this one a little bit. This project did not come out of the blue. I can tell you I've met with our good transportation agency many times over this one, met with other people. This project's been worked out from a whole lot of angles, and it kind of came to the point that it ended up not getting in the way it probably should have as far as that end of it. It did come in on a round robin, but I can assure you that this was not an unknown either to the appropriations. It might have been to some of them, but most of them it's been known about. It's been openly looked at, and it doesn't just involve a rodeo facility. It's kind of interesting is there's actually a huge number of houses planned there. And we don't know when they're going to happen, but that has been brought up by the Appropriations Committee, and the houses are in the hundreds. And they actually need to be able to get back and forth. If you look in this town, you'll find that almost anywhere where there is much traffic back and forth across on foot, there is a number of these exact overpasses throughout this town and other towns, and they're actually a safety issue, and they're important. Interstates are tough things to get across. This is one of the ones that I strongly support, and I think it's a good project. It's timely, and it runs multiple layers of function for not only the community of the state. This is the largest event that we have in the state, and it plays a key role in how they're able to handle the people that show up at that event. I'd ask you to resist this one. Thank you.
Any other
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great question from the Chairman of Transportation. Good to hear that question now as opposed to any other time. So yeah, this project, as the good president said, has been in the works for a long time. The city of Cheyenne works closely with its partners, primarily Cheyenne Frontier Days and of course the military base. And recognizing that that area is right in that same little triangle of geographic location, they have been partnering together to find a solution both to a need for more housing for the military members, parking and transportation for Frontier Days, and then the city of Cheyenne's growth. So those three pieces and those three entities, in addition to YDOT, have been having these conversations for years. They have approached many members of the legislature and I believe many members of JAC in order to get this project underway. It's anticipated that the total cost will be about $8 million. The county, the city, and the rodeo have all put in $3 million. They've obligated, and they're really hoping to be able to pull the project off, to put in an overpass over I-25, allowing access for both the rodeo grounds and that parking, as we discussed on the first reading of the amendment, full transparency there. And then in addition to where that anticipated housing will be, it's called an enhanced use lease, where the military through the Department of Defense has been working extensively on about 96 acres of this land that would be provided with the access of the overpass to this space, both for housing, some commercial, and parking for the rodeo and that transportation. As you know, those of you who come and you see that overflow lot for the rodeo, which continues to increase in visitation year after year, that would provide, instead of the buses going through the city, they could just directly go over that overpass. So that's the source of this. It's asked for by the community, supports tourism, supports the military infrastructure, supports the city of Cheyenne. That's all it does. That's all it is. Hopefully that answers your questions. Thank you.
Senator Kinski.
Just a point of clarification. I've been on the Appropriations Committee 5 years. I never heard a word of this. First I heard of it was in the round robin, and I've gotten more information in the last 10 minutes than I did in the Appropriations Committee when the motion was made. Just clarify that. Thank you.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, for my second time, and I also served for 4 years, but Mr. President, I am intimately familiar with a number of projects that we've got going on in my area. We got the old state prison over there where we had people like Big Nose George and Butch Cassidy, and we've had a lot of conversations, a lot of planning about rehab on that stuff. So my point being is every one of you have a project that you've worked on for numerous years at your local location. We still have a process. If there was this much work done up front, why did we have to hear about it in a round robin? Mr. Chairman, I don't deny, and I appreciate the fact that they've done a tremendous amount of planning, but it hasn't gone through our normal process, and it shouldn't have showed up. If all that information was available, we should have had SBC involved. We should have had the city in there testifying at Frontier Days. We should have had the plans. We should have had the budgets. That's what the JAC looks at when they make these decisions. I think they've probably done a wonderful job. We just don't know enough about it. But apparently this has been well vetted, Mr. Chairman. I'm saying, and I'm sure it has. We need to honor the process. We should not be coming in at the last minute and say, well, locally, we've done all this stuff. Because I know every one of you have got some similar project that you've been involved with. And we direct them to the State Building Commission, School Facilities Commission, we direct them to YDOT, we direct them to state parks, we direct them to Water Development Commission, we direct them to SLIB, we direct them and we run through all those different processes for construction for our local government entities, Mr. Chairman. This is probably a good project, but it is a classic example, in my opinion, of a round robin that shows up that probably we should not start this precedent. On and for the amendment.
Spoke 2 times. Sponsor spoken to twice. Roll call. Sorry.
Second reading amendment number 3. Anderson? No. Baldwin? No. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? No. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? No. French? Aye. Murphy? No. Guru? No. Hicks?
Aye.
Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? No. Kinsky?
Aye.
Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote close. Second reading amendment number 3, 14 aye, 17 no.
By your vote, second reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 146 has failed the Senate. Senator Hicks, do we have one more?
Mr. President, I do not.
Do not, okay. Guess we'll go back to number 1 then. Is it in order at this point? Do we have a revision for number 1 yet?
Mr. President, microphone.
Yeah.
1 will be withdrawn, and we have a 7 that takes the place of it. I can do that now or in numeric order.
Can we read in amendment number 1?
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 1, section 67, capital construction, page 10, line 21 in.
Senator Kinsky.
I would withdraw amendment, second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 146.
That objection so ordered. Amendment number 5, please, Randy.
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 5, section 27, capital construction, page 8, line 11 under.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 146. It's a simple little amendment. We're cutting the $34 million for the building in Riverton, the state office building. For the reasons you've just heard about why we shouldn't do these round robins, this is the very good example of that. There is a study, survey and a study in the budget this year for study of this facility. I think we need to get that done before we appropriate the money for doing it. With the office building in Casper, we studied it for 5 years before we came and made a proposal for the money. And I think this one deserves the same amount of care. I asked them questions about the people that are there. I found out that we're leasing 24,245 square feet for about $289,000, and there's 9 agencies, but I didn't find out how many employees there were. But at that 289,000, say 300,000, it'll take about 113 years to pay it out. And I think that's why we have the survey asking if there's other employees that would like to move to Riverton to fill this building out. So there's a lot of work to be done to figure out if we need this building or not. And I would say it's not time for the $34 million. I would encourage your vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. So against the amendment, this comes down to, in my opinion, an issue that we've been talking about, this body has been talking about for some time, which is centralizing our state government. We who do not live in the capital many of us, I'm one of them, believe that centralizing some of our state agencies to other parts of the state is not only convenient for our constituents, but it has all the ramifications of what goes with that when we do centralize government. A centralized government that is responsive to our constituents, where we don't have to go to Cheyenne, but that we can go throughout the state. There's no secret to the fact that when these agencies, such as Casper, receive a state office building, there's obviously economic development for that community. I happen to be someone who believes very strongly that we do need to centralize our state government, and in the process, the beneficiaries of those communities that receive those agencies, it only helps each and every one of us. With regard to Riverton, Riverton is an apt place. It's centrally located. As the previous speaker says, we do have agencies and employees there. I will simply say, after talking to others in this chamber who have been here far longer than I have, that this is not a new idea. This is an issue that my seniors who have been here longer than me have been talking about for some time. We are in a good financial position today where we can continue that process of centralizing our government. And I think there's a lot of people in this body who believe that centralizing government for the benefit of all our constituents, whether it be in Riverton or whether it be in Rock Springs or Afton or Casper, is a good thing. And I would encourage this body, because of the financial condition that we're in right now, that we all agree we're not going to be in this position every single year, that this is an opportunity for us to do that. And I think there are good reasons. We can get into the argument or the discussion of why centralization of state agencies and governments are good or bad, but I think for most of us, we understand that it is helpful to our communities, and this is an opportunity to do that. And again, as I say, I think this conversation has actually been going on for some time. So I ask that you vote against this, and that we receive the benefits of what we and others previously have been trying to do in centralizing these agencies. Thank you.
Other comments? You're Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. I appreciated the senator from Natrona County coming to me yesterday to ask if I'd like to join him in a visit about this appropriation. And I said, absolutely. I've got a little bit of a track record of working on and around our facilities for a long time for the state Senate, and a couple of things really stood out on this one. One is, my friend from Riverton is exactly right. This was an idea that came up 3 or 4 years ago. It revolved around a vacated school building, and it certainly wasn't a terrible idea that we have some kind of an office up there, some office building. But what stood out for me was, Mr. President, just that it kind of arrived out of left field, at least from my perspective. The idea of building a building up there, and it just looked, my goodness, you know, a $34 million line item. I just felt like we ought to visit about that. As many things as we've tried to cut in our budgets while we're down here, the things that we can't fund, I think it's absolutely appropriate that we at least visit about this. I don't want anybody in here to think that I'm going after any individual county or person or senator or anything else. I just think when we're going to spend this kind of money, the majority floor leaders reminded us that we really ought to abide by a process. It just doesn't feel like there's been a whole lot of process here, Mr. President. It's kind of the cart before the horse. I don't know what we need up there. I don't even know how many people we've got up there. It looks to me like the square footage is going to be awfully rich. My friend from Casper pointed out that it'll take us about 113 years to pencil that one out. That seems a little rich to me. So, you know, yeah, we've got a little extra money. We've just got to decide if this is where we want to put it now. I don't necessarily oppose the idea of having a state office building someday up there, Mr. President, but right now, set the money aside now before we even have a picture of what we've got going on. It just doesn't seem quite there to me. Thank you.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, on and against the amendment. So, Mr. President, I went back and pulled the 2020 CapCon bill. And at that time in 2020, we had an appropriation of $5.6 million for partial demolition of the Tonkin facility and to refurbish the remaining portion of the facility for future occupancy by state agencies. So for 3 years, we've had an appropriation to start looking at this facility. And then we run into COVID, Mr. President, and we had a giant economic downturn, so we backed off for a year. So last year, the discussion was with the Joint Appropriations Committee is to go ahead, remove the footnote about the state office building, go ahead and bring back the appropriation to go ahead and do the demolition with the idea that we would come back and start putting money away for this facility and do the study at the same time. So, Mr. Chairman, that's not unusual. You're standing in a building that was refurbished a few years ago, long before we even had any architectural designs for it. We had an account, and they saved for a decade, Mr. President, and then they put money in there, and they put money in, $330 million. Before we ever had any designs, we knew that we wanted to refurbish this. We do this all the time. We have this thing called this penitentiary account that we put in every biennium, $10 million. We know at some time out in the future, the state of Wyoming is going to have to build a new penitentiary. So we save for it, and we put money away for it, and we've got that account. And so the actions of this body, a week ago, we took all the revisions from the Department of Health and we put them in the demolition account. So if you pull up the CapCon bill that you have before you now, it appropriated on line 12, state hospital demo account, $15 million. There's still $24 million in that account, but we don't have any plans for it, Mr. President. We just know at some point in time in the future as this project moves forward, that we're going to need money to do the demo work. We have a number of examples where this is standard procedure for the legislature to put money in these accounts for future expenditures. Now, here's the other side of that, Mr. President. At some point in time, if this doesn't come to fruition, then we can go in there, we can take that money out and reallocate it. That's the process, Mr. Chairman. It's not unusual to do this. It's been done over and over again. We're standing in one of those facilities today, and this project has been on the works for 3 years now, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a lot of money, and I guess I have more questions about it. I think this is one that we probably need to spend a little time on and understand better. I do recall it being in the budget 3 years ago, but it seemed to me at that time that it didn't come through an SBC process and an executive branch initiative that required an additional state office building through through Riverton. It was my recollection at the time that this was something that was one of those types of projects that we just had a long debate about, which is, kind of coming in through the budget more than it was through any particular standard process. So before I vote on this, and $34 million, and that's not the end, to be clear, Mr. President. $34 million is not the price tag of this project. $34 million, as I understand it, is the first payment on this process, I believe, if I understand it correctly. And so that, I guess, will be my first question. Am I right or wrong on that, or is $34 million the complete price tag? But it's my understanding that this would be the next state office building based on the assumption that it would have a capacity of potentially a few hundred people and more people than we even have in that Riverton facility. It was my understanding that while this has been an ongoing discussion, that the reason we were doing the study was not necessarily to design this building, but to actually understand if it made sense for the state to have another office building in this location, whether that penciled out as a good idea or a bad idea. And Mr. President, to find out whether employees located elsewhere in the state would be interested in relocating and working in a new upscaled facility. So I guess I want to understand more about this particular process. Remember, we were shutting down school buildings that went through many years of vetted processing but didn't quite check all of the boxes. Here's a $34 million question mark that honestly I don't understand enough about, because all I've heard is one particular building, which the motivation as I see it is more a desire to refurbish it, remodel, and use an old building, renovate it in one location of the state, and then looking for a business model that helps to support that more than it is a call from the executive branch to find us new locations for an office building. So, Mr. President, I'd like to learn more about this. Has this been vetted through the SBC process? All of the processes the majority floor leader has laid out as being essential for us before we would fund a project? And what was the timeline for vetting this proposed building and the building design through the SBC prior to funding it? So if we could get a little more information, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Landon for your second time.
So, Mr. President, whether you vote this up or vote it down, I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation about it. I would throw this out just for edification. If we were to spend $500 per square foot on a building like this, 25,000 square feet of building, which is about what we need for what we have up in Riverton, that price tag would be $12.5 million. Once again, $500 a square foot. I think we can build them for less than that. We certainly did in the Casper structure, but again, the 34 million is quite a line item to consider. Thank you.
Time.
Senator Hicks.
So I think we should learn the lessons that we did with the office building in Casper. And that wasn't an executive branch-driven process. In fact, one of the former speakers brought that. That was a legislative-driven effort. It didn't start with an SBC. It has actually started the exact same way that we're starting this process here. That's a lesson that we learned from that facility up there. You know, whether $500 today, that's what it may have cost for that project. I mean, only thing I've heard from our agencies and from everybody on this floor is inflation, inflation, inflation. So maybe it is a $12 million facility. Add on that 15% inflation, which I actually think construction costs are going to come down, Mr. President. But again, this is a legislative-driven process. This is the way we've done things. This is why we started with the Casper office building. Wonderful facility, Mr. President. It's the envy of every other community in the state of Wyoming. This is just starting a process, the same that we did there. Hopefully we can learn those lessons, move this thing down. If we need this money, we can always go back and get it a year from now if we need it. Mr. Chairman, on and against the amendment.
Is that your second time, Senator Hicks? All done. Sorry.
No, it's not my amendment. So
What? Yes. Ah, thank you. My bad. My bad. Senator Salazar. My apologies.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. President.
We've had enough from the majority floor there. I was thinking it was one more of his. It's my bad.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'll just simply make one or two comments. Again, I don't agree with the argument that it's going to take 100 years to we are hoping with full capacity of the numbers in this new office building that in fact we can save money for the state. I will also say to the body, which hasn't been addressed yet, that there is a task force looking at this. To the majority leader's point, he is exactly correct. Let's take a look at what the task force, which is, by the way, is comprised of both chambers, a lot of smart people on both sides. Let's take a look at it. If it doesn't make sense, let's not do it. Let's not do it then, and we can pull back. But there is a task force connected with this. We are doing it the right way. The bottom line, Mr. President, is this. If you believe in centralizing our state government so that everything isn't in Cheyenne, and that we can diversify to other communities, I think that's a good thing. And I think it helps our constituents. On and against the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, and I confess to be a little confused. As I read the amendment, it decreases the amount by 34 million. And that 34 million is going to go to an office building that is obviously much larger than we need, because the crude calculation is it would take 113 years to pay it off at current usage. And yeah, I hear the argument that it in reality won't take that long. Sounds to me like we're building an office building so that we have space to grow government in. Mr. President, am I missing something, or because it looks to me like the amendment, which is decreasing the amount of the spending, is a good thing to do.
Senator Anderson, for your second time.
Mr. President, for my second time on and for the amendment, I don't think there's any disagreement that we want to study and see what we need in Riverton. We have agencies there, we have personnel there. What we don't know is what size building we need and what we need to do with that. And I think the senator from Riverton area is right. We got a task force working on that. We need to work that up and come back and get the correct amount on this. 34, I would submit to you, isn't the correct amount and is too much, and I'd ask you to vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Question being called. We're voting on second read amendment number 5 to Senate File 146. Involves money. Be a roll call.
Roll call, second reading amendment number 5. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Whitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Second reading amendment number 5, 28 aye, 3 no.
By your vote, second reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 146 has passed the Senate. Next amendment, please.
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 6, Section 7, Economic Development, delete.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 6 to Senate File 146 and ask for the body's favorable consideration. Mr. President, what this amendment would do is go back and reinsert some of the language that we struck in the previous amendment dealing with the winter recreational facilities. It also would increase the appropriation by $1 million and make it, most importantly, in my mind, so that more than one city or town could apply. So I hope that this helps with some of the concerns about the way that the process works in appropriation. There's lots of, or at least one more good project I'm aware of in my neck of the woods that has been well vetted. And I'll just, just be specific, I guess. The city of Douglas has been looking to build its own ice rink on a city-owned lot in a park. And so it's something that has been very well vetted. In fact, the city council's already appropriated $250,000 towards that infrastructure. I bring it up here, Mr. President, because the current situation is that the hockey club is using our Wyoming State Fairgrounds for that facility. If we were able to move them out of that facility, it would open up the fairgrounds for more year-round events, and I think it'd be a win-win for state government, for certainly the folks who have to play hockey, and the folks who, the parents who follow them around the state to make all that possible. But I think there is a nexus with the state government here because it would help our Wyoming State Fairgrounds and increase revenue to those fairgrounds if we were to approve this. But really what this amendment does is it sets up the process so that anybody can apply, and if need be, the SLIB can award grants to more than one entity. So that's the main thrust of the bill. Like I said, I felt the need to increase appropriation by $1 million just so it doesn't get too competitive with my friends from Riverton. But that's the amendment. I hope that we can support it and support an important part of our culture here in Wyoming.
Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I'm on and for this amendment. I do have a couple of questions, though, when you stand up for your second time. It's unclear to me how the matching would work at this point in time based on previous actions, so if you could let me know how that works. And the second question relates to timeline. Is this structured, would this end up being structured in a way that you'd pretty much have to have a project in queue right now, or would this be something that would have a sufficient timeline that any of the communities represented by the folks in this chamber would potentially have an opportunity to put together a grant application and participate in one of these winter recreational facilities? Thank you, Mr. President.
Mayor Anderson.
Mr. President, I'd like to divide this amendment.
Let's hear it.
First division would be lines 1 through 5, or 1 through 9, excuse me. And second would be 10 through 14, and I guess 15, 16 must go with both. I don't know.
Yep. Okay, it's divisible. Which division would you like to go first? Division 1 will be lines 1 through 9.
Yeah.
And Division 2 will be 10 through 14. 15, 16 will travel with both. Which division would you like to address first? Senator Ellis.
Just point of order, does 1 and 2 need to go with both as well?
Yes. Yeah, they do. Like I said, 14, 15 will stand with either one if it passes. So
1 and 2 needs to
1 and 2 as well. Thank
be
you.
with both, yeah.
Okay. Senator Anderson.
So Division 1, Mr. Chairman, I'm proposing that we do not do this. That adds $1 million to this appropriation. I'm not for adding $1 million to it.
Further discussion. Further discussion. Question being called on Division 1. That's going to be a roll call once again. It's money. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
If you would, could you just clarify what a yes vote does on this division and what a no vote does on this division?
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Yes, a yes vote on Division 1 will take all of the money out of the bill the way I read it. It deletes the 3,000,005, or it takes it back to Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. Mr. President, because of the lines 1 and 2 going with either amendment, you're going to start at a $3.5 million point appropriation. Okay. If either of the two divisions passes, you'll have $3.5 million for a winter facility.
Okay.
If Division 1, which we're on now, passes, that $3.5 million would go to $4.5 million. So this vote is an increase. If you vote aye, you are increasing from $3.5 million to $4.5 million on the appropriation.
Thank you. That's correct. Roll call.
Roll call on Division 1, second reading amendment number 6. Anderson? No. Baldwin? No. Barlow? No. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? No. French? No. Murphy? No. Guru? No. Hicks? No. Hutchings? Hutchings, aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? No. Kinski? No. Kolb? No. Landon? No. Larson? No. McEwen? No. No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? Aye. Excuse me. Salazar? Salazar, aye. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Ide? I to no. Hutchings, I to no. Salazar? I to no. Beitman? I to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Division 1, 3 aye, 28 no.
By your vote, Division 1 to second read amendment 6, Senate File 146 has failed the Senate. We are on Division 2, which is lines 10 through 14. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I think this one's all right. I hope you vote in favor of Section 2. Thank you.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, on and against the amendment, if you vote yes for this, you just reverse the action that we just took by stripping this out of there because it was an earmark, Mr. President. So I would encourage you to be a consistent vote and vote no for earmarks.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I disagree with the good majority floor leader. It shifts it from being an earmark where there's one project in one location that can receive these funds to a project opportunity where any of our communities can apply. I have no idea if we have anything on the table that relates to this, but we have winter recreation facilities. This would be a potential opportunity maybe for us to improve or extend those. I'm happy to compete on a level playing field for a nice funding project like this, which I think we all agree, Mr. President, is good for our communities, good for economic development, and really provides more recreational opportunities for all of our communities. So that's why I voted for the increase in funding, in fact. I think this is nice.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would urge a no vote, which would keep the ice rink out of the CapCon, and here's why. Look at the very top where it says budgets affected. Section 7, economic development. An ice rink is economic development. This is what we've been trying to get away from in the Business Council, is people with a wink and a nod calling something economic development when really it's not really about creating jobs in our communities. This is the very thing we've the Business Council has successfully gotten away from over the last 2 years at the urging of the legislature. So they're focusing their efforts on, not on ice rinks and not on helping towns that just want some subsidy for their sewer lines, but on attracting real jobs. The most recent one in the university town, initially 75 jobs, growing to over 100. That's what we want them focused on, not community amenities. I would urge no vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. Several of the communities in my district have smaller skating rinks, aquatic centers, several different kinds of recreation facilities that raise the money for themselves, they build it themselves. It's for the people and it's by the people of that community. I'm not sure why the state should be involved in funding these particular projects. And no matter whether you put it in this senator's town or that senator's town, it's still, we're picking one winner. That's not a statewide project. It's not something that's for the good of the entire state. It's for the good of a particular community. Thank you, sir.
Senator McEwen.
I'm kind of confused. We have an Air Force base around here that doesn't have an airfield, and it's the only one. Now we have one that doesn't have a golf course? I just want to make sure I understood that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good humor. Good humor. Senator Boner for explanation.
Yeah, well, on that previous comment, I guess it takes the Army veterans about 30 minutes to come up with that observation.
Senator McEwen, that was not a personal attack. That was.
But sure, hey, I'm proud to have served in a ground-based unit in the United States Air Force. It wasn't the easiest thing when, you know, the folks running the show were fire pilots. But anyways, back on this amendment. Probably just lost a vote there. That's okay. So, like I said, Mr. Chairman, so to answer some questions from the minority leader, the timeline is the funds have to be encumbered or obligated by June 30th, 2024. And it's my understanding that the amendment, I think it's number 4, that made the delineation that these are non-state funds. I think that's still in effect. So to answer those questions right off the bat, but as far as the broader discussion, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this is one-time funds that can go to our communities to help diversify our economy. I don't know what the discussions have been in the Business Council with the Appropriations Committee. I think that this is something that will clearly help, I know my community, probably other communities, because, you know, recreation is important, especially in a place maybe we're not known for that much recreation. We're known for, you know, energy, we're known for agriculture, but anything we can do to help give our families something to do in the winter, I think that's actually really important. I also point out, at least in one instance, that, you know, there is once again, an nexus with state government. So clearly, at least with one application, I can promise you there would be a benefit to state government, as I previously explained. So like I said, these are one-time funds. I think maybe this is a time that we can forget about the trajectory that we've been on for the past couple years, and not realizing that maybe it's not going to continue moving forward for very long. But this is one-time funds for a good cause that will help with recreation and help increase the quality of life. And I think that's okay to have that conversation regardless of what we've been doing the past couple years.
Question called. We're voting on Division 2 of second reading amendment number 6 to Senate File 146. Be a roll call.
Division 2, amendment roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? No. No. Barlow? No. Whiteman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstader? No. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Murphy? No. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. Kinsky? No. Cole? No. Landon? No. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Closing vote. Ellis, aye to no. Closing vote. Vote closed. On Division 2, 5 aye, 26 no.
By your vote, Division 2, second read amendment number 6 to Senate File 146 has failed to pass the Senate with both down. Second read amendment number 6 to Senate File 146 has failed the Senate. Last amendment.
Senate File 146, second reading amendment number 7, Section 67, Capital Construction, page 4 after line 16, insert.
Chairman Kinsky.
Mr. President, I would move second reading amendment number 7, the last amendment, to Senate File 146. First, let me apologize for the length, but it will be worthwhile because it saves $49 million. And then it and then it clarifies a note we previously approved with respect to construction of any projects other than the dorms. So you will recall that there's currently $70 million in the budget for the University of Wyoming dorms. First, we were going through our memory banks and we recalled in 2019, when we were in the Jonas Center, we had appropriated $49 million to help the university with their bond issue. They ended up not needing the $49 million. It's still there, unused. So this amendment pulls that $49 million back. It's so lengthy because staff had to reproduce that section of the session laws, which is not in the Green Book, in order to make sure the correction was proper. So this reversion begins on page 1, line 1, goes all the way over to page 2, line 37. And the operative pieces of it are, if you'll see in section 7, on page 2, line 11, you'll see there was appropriated $15 million. And you will see on line 24, there was appropriated $34 million, grand total of $49 million. Now the session law this amends the session law in 3 places. On line 3, it says the funds are subject to section 7A and 7B of the Act. On line 18, section 7A is modified to say all unexpended, unobligated funds appropriated into the subsection shall revert to the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account on March 24, 2023. In other words, 3 weeks after we adjourn. So there's the first 15 million saved. Then subsection 7B, the amendment begins on line 31. Again, all unexpended, unobligated funds appropriated into the subsection shall revert to the Legislative Stabilization account on March 24, 2023. The rest of it now, beginning on line 39 down through the end, deletes the prior footnote that we had told the university, do not spend any money on anything other than the dorms. On page 3, lines 2 through 10 simply do some renumbering. And the operative portion on page 3 begins on line 14. We do 2 things. First, we are revising the limiting language. And here's why it needed revision. We just said you can't spend anything on the west stands. You can't spend anything on the pool. Well, in fact, they have to maintain the pool. there might be emergency needs for the pool, and they are already engaged in design of the pool. So this has been rewritten to say you can do those things. Do not go to construction without further legislative authorization. So it's the spirit of the same footnote as before, but it's in more specific language, much more clear. Then on line 31 through the end of it, what we're doing is we're telling them, we want to know every step of the way how this project is doing. We want you to report back on a quarterly basis to the Joint Appropriations Committee. On line 36, we want to know the construction budget and timelines for the projects. That's the dorms, the pool, and the West Stands. Line 40, we want to know the status and progress of those projects and the dorm housing. On line 44, we want to know of any change orders. And then on page 4, line 1, we want to know where they are in the fundraising efforts. Last year, we appropriated $50 million. They were to raise $1 for every 50. The year before that, we appropriated $6 million that they were to match 1 for 1. This is your Appropriations Committee saying, we want to get a handle on what you're doing over there. We want you to be accountable and report back to us where we are. We don't want any more runaways. Thank you, Mr. I'd urge an affirmative vote.
Further discussion. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly a lot of work went into this. I commend the chairman for that. I just had one question related to the projects that we will prohibit under Section 11. My understanding was that particularly on that War Memorial West Stands construction project, we were a little over 30% already contracted on construction for that. So the question is not only have we considered that ramification, but how much is that going to cost us to shut that down and wait a year before we pick it back up again? I ask that simply because I think those of us who have been in here would all admit that we've cost ourselves some money doing this. You know, when we shut something down over there and we hold off on things, it's cost us a lot of money, Mr. President. I like this amendment. I'm going to vote for it. I have a little bit of concern that we're shutting down something that's already underway, and whether or not we might want to consider, are those reports not going to be good enough? If it's going to cost us more money, I just caution that. I don't know about that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Further discussion. Senator Barlow, do you have? Okay, Senator Kinski for your second time.
Great question to my friend from Casper. The percentage that you heard referred to was the percentage of design. They're spending money on the design. And they have not started on the construction. The university assures us that their policy is they do not start on construction until they have the project entirely paid for. The exception being the dorm project. So we're, and the phrase shutting down, we're saying, go ahead and design it. And then when this body has a clearer idea what it's going to cost and how long it's going to take, you can ask for further authorization. How much is it going to cost us? Well, that's, some feel that there's nowhere to go but up on prices. Having worked in the construction business before myself, I've seen contractors go from feast to famine pretty quick. I have a friend that runs a fairly large outfit, and he says, I'm feasting now. 2 years from now, we'll all be cutting each other up for the work. And the cost of materials is starting to come down. But others may disagree with that. But in any event, the note is consistent with the spirit of what we passed before. We just have to make allowance for them to do routine maintenance, emergency, and so forth. I'd urge an aye vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We're voting on second reading amendment number 7 to Senate File 146. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Second reading amendment number 7, Anderson. Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Beitman. Aye. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Ellis. Aye. French. Aye. Furphy. No. Guru. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. Aye. Ide. Aye. Jones. Aye. Kinsky. Aye. Cole. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. President Driscoll.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Second reading amendment number 7, 30 aye, 1 no.
By your vote, second reading amendment number 7, the Senate File 146 is passed the Senate. We are back on the bill. Question being called. Senate File 146 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business consideration of bills on general file.
Mr. President, microphone. Mr. President, I request the committee of the whole stand at ease to the sound of the gavel. We're going to take a little 10-minute break now and then come back in and run about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Mr. President. Oh, Mr. President,
Yeah.
Mr. President, I move that, or I request we stand in recess for 10 minutes to take a break.
Committee reports.
Mr. President, the following report was previously read in as HB 7 in error. The correct report follows. February 7, 2023. Mr. President, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 18 engrossed, Missing Person Alert Systems, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman.
Thanks, Randy. Fellow senators, on the back wall, back behind Senator Scott, is my brother-in-law, Scott Shoup, and my wife, Zanny. Back again yesterday was her birthday, so we skipped off one day. Please join me in welcoming. Day to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Zanny, happy birthday to you. Senator Hicks.
The floor.
Granted.
I was just wondering why your beautiful bride married somebody as old as you are.
That's a great question, isn't it? Scott is a longtime school teacher and educator and principal that just retired and moved up to our home country. So glad to have him there. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, with that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
Mr. President, I move the Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senator Nethercott. Show us how it's done again. We've got 19 bills in 10 minutes.
Get it done.
All right, Committee of Whole will come to order. Our first bill for consideration is House Bill 35.
House Bill 35, Daycare Certification Requirement Amendments, sponsored by Representative Heiner, an act relating to child care facilities, was referred to Committee number 10, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, Bouchard, Dockstader, and Hutchings. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rises support to do so with the recommendation that House Bill 35, Daycare Certification Requirement Amendments do pass. It does have a standing committee amendment, if I can have that read in.
House Bill 35, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, corrected copy, page 1, line 3, delete.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you for the explanation of the bill and that amendment. I will turn to my neighbor from the north part of my county, Senator Dockstader.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me tell you why we're doing 35. For many families in Wyoming, lack of accessible child care is proving to be a barrier to parental employment, especially for mothers. When child care is available, it can lead to greater financial stability for the families and overall economic growth for their respective communities. Now let's talk about the size of those communities, where it helps most. We have a small community out west, less than 1,000 people, has one child care facility. Due to the licensing requirements, the person was planning to close. In a community that small, it would have a ripple effect. I'll wait just a moment, Madam Chair. Thank you. It would have a ripple effect. You close one facility like that all the way through town because people are using it to go to their jobs. In rural and small communities, available child care options are often far in between. Think about your own small communities. In Wyoming, more than 34% of the families live in child care deserts. Child care desert is defined as a census tract with at least 50 children under the age of 5, where either there are no options or there are 3 times the number of children as there are spaces available. Access challenges have forced many parents to change their jobs, reduce their hours, or quit altogether. Parents working non-traditional hours, like early mornings, evenings, overnights, and weekends, have fewer options. The coronavirus pandemic shone a spotlight on the child care crisis. Wyoming Department of Family Services reports that between 2017 and 2021, Wyoming lost 89 child care facilities. That's a 13% reduction. While urban counties like Laramie County only lost 4%, the loss in the rural counties was much more significant, with Niobrara losing 66% of their child care facilities. Those are available licensed child care facilities. Bighorn, Fremont, Washakie, and Uintah counties lost between 27 and 33% in each county. Child care deserts are disproportionately in low-income urban and rural communities. In cities, daycare tends to be concentrated in the wealthier neighborhoods. With inflation at a 40-year high, many parents are facing a dilemma. They can't find child care, but they can't afford to stay home either anymore. In Wyoming, during 2021, 19% of the student parents canceled plans to attend school during the COVID-19 situation to care for someone whose care arrangements were disrupted. Proving child care needs to be approached from many different angles. One of those angles comes from federal financial plans, but let me suggest there's a better way that we can do it without all the federal money coming in. We can make reforms and improve the regulations that we have right here at home in Wyoming. We can help small providers be successful without the burden of government intervention. And so with that, Madam Chair, we have House Bill 35. I'll just go over it quickly. An act relating to child care facilities providing for exemptions. This is where we step in and try to help these smaller facilities. Those exemptions are noted on page 2. Who does it apply for? Well, it's for those fewer preschool facilities enrolling fewer than 8 minors. And with that, we made a change in committee on what we're calling preschool. And I'd like to have the first
The standing committee.
standing committee amendment number 1, House Bill 35, read in, please.
It has been read in. If
Oh,
you'd like to move it, Senator.
Excuse me, I'd like to move House Bill 30, standing committee number 1 to House Bill 35. In discussion in committee, we felt like daycare was probably the better word to insert there, so that's what we did. It's for fewer than 8 minors who are all over 36 months old, or fewer than 10 minors who are all over 48 months. Qualifying for those exemptions, these are the qualifying notes. Does not administer medications, does not prepare food, requires the minors to be trained and able to use a bathroom, limits the minors to no more than 10 hours of preschool attendance, adheres to all applicable local health, safety, and fire codes or regulations. And then simply, we call upon the Family Services to promulgate the rules, and we set it up in the next section when it'll be effective. With that, folks, I bring you House Bill 35, and stand for questions. There is one more amendment.
We're on standing committee amendment number 1
Oh,
to
yeah.
House Bill 35. Are there any questions on the standing committee amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Dockstetter's motion to adopt standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 35, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 35 has been adopted. There is a committee of the whole amendment. Can we have that read in?
House Bill 35, Committee of the Whole Amendment to number 1, page 1 above line 1, in.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This committee of the whole amendment, senators, was brought to me after we actually heard this in the committee. This simply seeks to add some sideboards to this, qualifying that this person providing the daycare has CPR certification, first aid certification, and all those safety valves that we have for all the other facilities. The final thing that this amendment does is stipulate that when they recruit somebody, when somebody signs up their child for this daycare, that they are informed that this is not a licensed facility. Just simply an informative amendment. And with that, I would ask for your aye votes.
Questions on the Committee of the Whole amendment? Seeing none, sensing you're ready for the question, all those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 35 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 35 has been adopted. Back on the bill. Questions on the bill? Senator Dockstader.
Well, just again, that's what we're doing here, folks, is trying to open an avenue to help our really small providers in our really small towns. Ask for your support.
Senator Larson.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Page 2, line 14 and 15, I think you have it 10 hours limit for the week. Does that seem a little bit low? I mean, that'd be like 2 hours a day for 5 days.
Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, I'm looking on page 2, line 9, which says they can't provide food for the minors. What would be the risks if we took that out and allowed them to provide a snack for kids of this age? I can't see with the numbers involved, we'd be running any special risks if we did that. And I would like to know how the proponents of the bill feel about that one.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, this is an important bill and I understand it. I have lived these years of having childcare needs, and I know that childcare is tight and it's really expensive. And so I can appreciate the desire to relax some of our requirements, but I do have some concerns. A few years ago, I received an email from a woman who lives in my community, and she told me about a friend's child who was killed in home daycare. The child had been asphyxiated and met some of these requirements of being a really small in-home daycare. So she and I had talked to the Department of Family Services about insurance requirements, notifying parents, at least, if you're not going to adhere to all of the regulations that are required in statute, at least notifying parents so that they know that they're not regulated. So I understand the need. I think this is really tailored to a small number of daycare providers or preschool providers. But I think my concern is with some of the exemptions, and one of them has to do with the duty to inspect. And so, there are these requirements that say they're not allowed to administer medication. There can only be 10, minors that are of certain ages. But what kind of verification do they provide to the Department of Family Services to ensure that? And so I'm just curious, we want to provide flexibility, but don't want to tie the hands too much to make sure that they're complying with what we're trying to achieve here. So just some discussion on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And one thing that I don't understand is really a deep comprehension of the burden of licensure and monitoring and reporting. I do recognize that there's an additional burden that's associated with having a licensed daycare facility. But what I don't understand is how much of a burden that actually is, because again, delicensing or not requiring licensure is really going to be a pretty significant increase in risk for any children that end up at that unlicensed facility if we're not having drop-in visits, if we're not having the full regulatory authority behind it. So it shouldn't be taken lightly. I do understand the good senator, the proponent's interest in trying to provide some flexibility in a community, small communities around the state. But again, what does it actually look like? What does it cost? What's like a real dollar cost associated with the full licensure experience? And I don't just mean the license itself, but like the difference between being licensed and not being licensed. What does that look like to the bottom line of the facility for a year? I think if we're going to be considering policy like this, we should understand it deeply. This is non-trivial. We just heard the good senator from Laramie County discussing a death in an unlicensed facility, home daycare. So let's really understand what we're weighing into here, Madam Chairman.
Looks like some questions are stacked up for you, Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you. On the first one, the number, the 10, we're talking about low volume. We're talking about small facilities. Most of you are thinking about what you've seen in some of our larger cities. This is small. Talking about a town, in this case, under 1,000 people, maybe even less than that. As far as feeding them, it's my understanding they can still have their snacks and so forth, but at full-fledged meals is no. And the verification with DFS, those last two, where you come in and say, well, what does it mean financially? What does it mean? Do we have to have all these extra rules? No, that's what we can do. We can have the Department of Family Services do what they do best. They can promulgate the rules and allow for some flexibility for our very small operations. Don't get caught up in the fact that this could be larger facilities. This is small. These are small towns. The one I'm talking about is one facility in the town. They lose that, and that's probably what will happen. They'll say, we're done with all the regulations. That's it. There is no daycare for another hour drive away.
Senators, I discourage you from talking about naps or snacks at this time of day. Senator Baldwin.
Just a couple of quick points there. And the food, just to clarify, they can give snacks. And the example that was given to us is, you can give a piece of bread, but you can't spread the peanut butter on the bread. And the reason being, because it brings in a whole new set of rules when you start preparing the food. Brings in a lot of the health department issues. You can give a package of Oreos. We got a package sitting back here now, if anybody wants a snack. Yeah. This is a little like a daycare, but that aside. And that was the issue with the food. It just brings in a whole new set of rules when you prepare food versus the other. As far as the rules, and I would add here, we had a death in our community. Somebody that was in a daycare that wasn't licensed, it wasn't anything. And it was a horrible, tragic incident. A bill like this would help prevent that. With the sideboards, it would help prevent that sort of circumstance. And we want to protect the kids at all costs. So that was the rules will be promulgated. That's provided for in the bill. So I think that's important to remember as well.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick example. I had foster children and I worked, and you don't always know when you're going to get foster children. So I have to prepare for daycare for these kids after school. So to answer the senator, don't know what county he's in, but with the white hair, he asked about the low volume. So I would have the children go to the daycare for maybe just an hour after school, and then I would run and pick them up. So that's why we have just the low volume. Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. And maybe I wasn't clear on the question. I don't understand what the economic barrier is and what would be closing down the facility in the small community. If we're going to bring a solution, it would be useful to understand the problem and the magnitude of the problem. The idea that maintaining a license is prohibitive in a small community might sound like it rings true, Madam Chairman, but I don't know why that would be the case. I just don't understand how expensive the licensure is. And if we don't know on committee of the whole, can we find out for second reading, and can we get some hard data on what the associated costs and expenses of the existing regulatory structure are for one of these smaller childcare facilities? And Madam Chairman, the other thing I would say is the idea that 9, it has to be less than 10, I think, for the older kids. 9 kids is a small number. Suggests that you've never tried to wrangle 9 7-year-olds at the same time. You're so outnumbered, they go in different directions, Madam Chairman, and you need a whole group of people to then go round them up, or maybe one good dog. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Madam Chairman, I recommend a border collie for that. They don't bite as much as the healers do, but Madam Chairman, I don't know anything about this subject, But I'm just wondering why the 48 months, because I'm just trying to run through scenarios in my mind, and particularly in these rural areas, and I understand the need. But the way I read this is if somebody had 4 kids under the age of 8, or enrolling 8 under the age of 36 months, and they only had 4, but they had 1 child that was over 48 months, they're not eligible for this. They could have 5 kids, but they've got 1 kid that's over 48 months. Are we making this so restrictive with those criteria that it's going to basically eliminate the ability for people to participate? So what's the magic about the 48 months? It would help me out a little bit.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. These numbers aren't magic, but there's licensing rules. And what we're doing is staying underneath the licensing rules that are already in place. And as far as the economics of this, it costs about $100,000 to open up a daycare like this. If you were doing it by the rules for more kids, and it isn't feasible to do 10 kids or less. And you just can't, you couldn't make money at it. So this does 2 things. It allows this to happen, allows it to be feasible economically, and it also allows the licensure not to be a problem. So understand the agency was involved in this, crafting this bill. They were there testifying. They didn't have any problems with this. And so I think people are looking for boogeymen here when there isn't any. Bottom line is, the numbers that have to do with kids that are under a certain age, I mean, those are all factored into those licensing rules, and this keeps it right underneath that wire. So I hope that answers the questions.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if you look at the statute, the statutory requirements are not terribly burdensome. It requires Department of Family Services, whoever their agent is that inspects these, to have access to inspect a property, make sure that the facility is uncrowded, safe, sanitary, well repaired, have to get a certificate, and then a process for revocation. So if you look at your statutes, that gives you a very light picture of what the requirements are. But if you look at the rules, they're really extensive. There are a lot of discussion about what happens if there are animals in the home. Are they allowed to be in kitchens or not kitchens? If you have a dog or cat, are they safe to be around kids? Children under 5, making sure they don't have direct contact with ferrets, baby chicks, and baby ducks. Pest control, sanitation, diaper changing area, which I know is addressed in the bill, but there are extensive requirements in the rule itself. So I think the difficulty that I'm having is understanding, it's easy to say it's exempt from these, certain number of statutory requirements, but that's not where the meat of the regulation is. It's in the regulation. So when the department says that they can write rules for these home-based services, how much of that comes in and how much doesn't? So that's the thing I'm struggling with. Again, I'm empathetic to this, and I remember some of my early childcare options. One was a home health care facility or a home care facility. My mom used to babysit families, but there are some exemptions listed in this, in our statutes. And they're things like, if you're just occasionally watching a friend's kid. So, trying to catch those instances where you have kids like my daughter who are just babysitting the neighborhood kids. So there are a number of those, but that's the balancing act we have is, how much intrusion and oversight should the Department of Family Services provide when we're offering these kind of services? So if we could get some more clarification on that, all of the burden is in the rules.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you go to page 2 and look at section 2, once the act passes, it appears the Department of Family Services shall promulgate the rules that are necessary to implement the act. You don't see them now because we haven't passed the act. That's my interpretation. If someone else has something different, I'm sure they'll let you know. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you. Note on the exemptions, legal parents or legal relatives care of a child. This is what is considered an exemption licensing. Occasional care of a neighbor or friend's child if the person providing the care does not regularly engage in the activity. Parents exchanging care on a cooperative basis. Child care provided by a person employed to come to the home, the child's parent or guardian. Child care facilities providing care for no more than 2 unrelated children. Foster care facilities supervised by the state and local government, school district, agency, or political subdivision thereof. And as far as the catch net for these concerns, yes, it's already in statute. And a good senator from this city emphasized the same point that I'm emphasizing. Department of Family Services shall promulgate the rules necessary. This is just simply making it possible for small operations in small rural areas to maintain what they have, to make sure that their community is assisted, people remain employed, there's a place to go for childcare.
Further discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. And I guess I'll just look to the second reading for some specifics on the costs associated with compliance. I do have a couple of questions, though, as I look at statute, trying to understand what the magnitude of the compliance is. And for certification, as I'm looking at 14.4.104 for the certification language, some of the concepts there are experience, education, training, uncrowded, safe, sanitary, and well-repaired facilities, things along those lines, which, again, seem like baseline that you would always want in place regardless of licensure, but I don't know if there's compliance with the legislation as written. But the question I have specifically, which seems to be exempted, and I don't know that there would be any right just within rule and regulation to achieve it, is 14.4.107. So I'll ask if there would be a provision for 14.4.107 to continue to apply, and that is inspection by certifying board right of entrance. So the concept there is the ability to investigate a facility where there's allegations of bad things happening, that you have DFS with the right to periodically and at reasonable times inspect, investigate, and examine all certified agencies and applicants for certification. So you can imagine that that is just trying to make sure that they're compliant with all of the standards that are put in place. Well, the proposed statutory change does have standards in place, but there doesn't appear to be any enforcement mechanism since the rest of the Act, 107, 108, and others, seem to be taken off the books. So even though there are some obligations, if you don't adhere, well, first of all, nobody'd be checking to see if you adhere to the obligations because the rest of the provisions are exempted. And there doesn't appear to be any ability to suspend, revoke, or not renew, which is what you see in 14.4.108, based on non-compliance with those standards. So, Madam Chairman, the first question then is, or the second question is has there been discussion about those aspects of the existing Act? And if so, is there a way that we could blend those in to the language as it states after the Committee of the Whole amendment so that there would be some type of enforcement available?
Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you. I'm just inquiring on the inspections now. We'll have that answered by second reading. As far as the rest of it, I still come back to how we promulgate those rules that can be taken care of. Those concerned about this are trying to take it in a direction that complicates it, and that's not what we're trying to do with this bill. We're trying to simplify the daycare procedures and help people have that opportunity without a big complicated process, but still make sure our children are safe. Those, as the good senator from this good city noted, the rules and regs are already in place. Department of Family Services comes in, promulgates those rules based on what's already in statute. That's already taken care of. Doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Can the inspections take place? I'll find out by second reading. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Sensing you are ready for the question, all those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the due pass recommendation of House Bill 35, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 35 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 97.
House Bill 97, Chancery Court Jurisdiction Amendments, sponsored by Representative Stiff, an act relating to civil procedure. Was referred to Committee Number 1, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, Cooper, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, I would move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation on House Bill 97, Chancery Court Jurisdiction Amendments. For an explanation of the bill, I'd ask that you call on the senator from Fremont County.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Madam Chairwoman, what this bill does is to allow for contract disputes involving a government agency and a contractor to be brought in the Chancery Court if the original contract specified that as the court to bring it. So the old language in the bill was that original and exclusive jurisdiction for any claim filed in the state court under this act shall be in the District Court of Wyoming. Appeals may be taken as provided by law. We're adding the clause, removing the and exclusive, and saying that original jurisdiction for any claim filed in state court under this act shall be in the District Court of Wyoming, except the claims or counterclaims in an action based on a contract entered into by a government entity may be brought, notice the may be brought in the Chancery Court if the contract provided that the Chancery Court shall be the venue for disputes arising under the contract and the claim or counterclaim is otherwise within the jurisdiction of the Chancery Court. That's the extent of the bill. It allows, we've established, Madam Chairwoman, these Chancery Court. It's still kind of getting its legs underneath it, but it's a business court. That's our idea, is to be expertise and rapid turnaround on matters involving business law. This would allow government entities to have contracts that would specify that would be the court to resolve the dispute. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Senator Case? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the due pass recommendation of House Bill 97, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 97 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for your consideration is House Bill 29.
House Bill 29, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to community college funding. Was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Brennan, Roth, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Scott, Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, I move from the Committee of the Whole rise and report it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 29 do pass, and I yield to Senator Rothfuss for an explanation of this good little House bill.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, House Bill 29 was a little bit of work from your Education Committee during the interim relating to distant education credit, and it was at the request of the community colleges that we take a look at this. Madam Chairman, since we started working on community college availability for distance education classes a number of years ago, and since we put in place the funding model for our community colleges, there has been in place a multiplier such that any distance education class would be treated as if it were 0.8 of a regular class from funding. We have in statute 3 other classifications: a standard class, which is multiplied by 1.0, an enhanced class at 1.25, and then a class that requires low class sizes and a lot of resources, which are funded at 1.5. You can imagine a welding class as an example of the last. Madam Chairman, the way the statute was structured, that 0.8 governs. So even if you're doing a welding style high intensity class that should be 1.5, if it's taught as distance education, it goes to a 0.8 for the funding. Madam Chairman, one thing we learned through COVID, it's that these distance education classes, as it turns out, do not cost less and do not take less intensive resources, nor less time from instructors, nor less qualified instructors, nor ease of larger classes than traditional classes. Turns out they're pretty much the same. So this little bill removes that 0.8 multiplier and basically goes back to evaluating a class, whether it's a traditional class, a hybrid class, or a distance education class, based on the multiplier of 1, 1.25, or 1.5, based again on resources and class sizes, normalizing it to the type of class as opposed to discriminating based on distance education classes. Madam Chairman, this should encourage our community colleges to offer more of their courses through distance education, even CTE-style courses and other more complicated courses, and I think it will help our students have better access to more diverse education through distance education and in a more fair and equitable manner for our community colleges. That's the bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Senator Rothfuss? Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the due pass recommendation of House Bill 29, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 29 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 28. Senator Scott. Oh, too fast.
House Bill 28, Community College Capital Construction, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to the duties of the Wyoming Community College Commission. Was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Blakeman, Brennan, Rothfuss, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Scott, Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, I move when the Committee of the Whole rise and report it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 28 do pass, and I yield to Senator Brennan for an explanation of this good little House bill.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have before you here House Bill 28, which is a community college capital construction bill, and it is an act relating to the duties of the Wyoming Community College Commission, increasing the minimum estimated cost of community college capital construction projects. If you go on to page 2, lines 3, and again on line 10, what they're asking is that we increase from 100,000 to 250,000, the amount of money that they don't need approval for. So let me just read lines 1, because I think reading it explains it well. Approve all new capital construction projects in excess of $250,000. So currently, anything above $100,000 has to be approved. What they're asking for is that we raise that to anything greater than $250,000 needs to be approved. Hopefully I explained that well, but if not, or if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Questions for Senator Brennan? Seeing none, and question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the due pass recommendation of House Bill 28, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 28 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 82.
House Bill 82, Defendant Mental Illness Examinations Amendments, sponsored by Representative Larson, an act relating to criminal procedure. Was referred to Committee Number 10, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, Bouchard, Dockstader, and Hutchings. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Senator Baldwin, what's your pleasure?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they do so at the recommendation of House Bill 82. Defendant mental illness examination amendments do pass. There is a standing committee amendment, if I can have that read in.
House Bill 82, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 11, after.
Thank you. For explanation of the bill and the standing committee amendment, I turn to our resident veterinarian who will give us his opinions.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So members, I am not going to be as effusive about good little House bills as some of my colleagues have been, because we had to actually make some corrections in this bill. So what you have before you, ladies and gentlemen, is a continuation of the work that's been done under mental health redesign and the work that, of course, brought us a new state hospital, et cetera. One of the things that has come up in that is we have two types of folks who are often requiring services at the state hospital. Folks under Title VII who are there to determine if they have a mental incompetency that would preclude them or would include them as facing prosecution, and folks under Title 25 who may be of danger to themselves or others. So this creates a bit of a logjam. And so what this bill attempts to do is to take the misdemeanants who also can request an evaluation, or through their counsel can request an evaluation at the state hospital, and says, hey folks, if you're a misdemeanant, we would like you to try every outpatient and every community-based resource before we take up bed space at the state hospital. So that is the intent of the bill. If I could, Madam Chairman, I'll just quickly through the bill, you will see that on the top of page 2, it breaks that out saying a felony offense, and then you go to the new language on page 6, talks about misdemeanants. Now, within that misdemeanant new language, Madam Chairman, this is where the Standing Committee Amendment comes in, and at this time I would move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 80, or excuse me, House Bill 82, and explain that. So what the language in this, and we all know this, ladies and gentlemen, we have these very torturous run-on sentences where we enter in a whole bunch of concepts into one sentence, and we think because of punctuation we can actually sort out what it means. Well, Madam Chairman, I think even with all that seemingly adequate punctuation, we didn't think in the committee we were getting to the resultant outcome, and so we made this amendment. So in this amendment, basically we're saying, first there's an outpatient, and if the outpatient indicates there's an inpatient need, it does not have to be at the Wyoming State Hospital. It can be at other facilities, because what we anticipate, what we hope is there will be others, including our community mental health centers, that may have crisis stabilization beds where these same type of assessments could take place. So Madam Chairman, I would call for the question. The second part of the Standing Committee Amendment, Madam Chairman, is to make this effective immediately, because apparently the services are available now, so we would just go ahead and do that. So I'd be glad to stand for any questions or call for the question on the Standing Committee Amendment.
Questions on the amendment? Seeing none and question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Barlow's motion that to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 82, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 82 has been adopted. Back on the bill. Questions for Senator Barlow? Question having been called, all those in favor that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the do pass recommendation of House Bill 82, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 82 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Our next House bill for consideration is House Bill 181.
House Bill 181 engrossed online sports wagering amendments, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee. An act relating to gaming was referred to Committee number 2, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Nethercott. No Senator Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Good senators, it looks like there's an error in my stack. I'll get that corrected. The next bill for your consideration, according to the listing up on the board, is House Bill 112.
House Bill 112, theft, penalty for fifth or subsequent offense, sponsored by Representative Oakley, an act relating to crimes and offenses. House Bill 112 engrossed. Was referred to Committee number 1, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Case, Cooper, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When the Committee of the Whole rises to report, I would move that it do so with a do pass recommendation on House Bill 112, theft penalty for fifth or subsequent offense. And for an explanation of the bill, I'd ask that you call on the senator from 10 Sleeps.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Discussing House Bill 112, theft penalty for the fifth and subsequent offense. I'm sure most of you realize or seen the reports about some of the big box stores, closing stores, the theft problems they have. Most of that being organized retail crime. It's up in the $100 billion range across the country, which seems a little detached for a lot of us, but the fact is it's happening right here at home as well. One of the speakers on this in the past here has talked about a group they're calling the ribeye ring over in the Wind River country. And they go in and lift large amounts of meat. I don't know how they get it out. I'm not smart enough to do that. But they're stealing large amounts of meat, and then the next day you can go out, you can buy that meat on the internet. And it's not just the meat, it's all kind of products. It's really turning into a problem in our communities. But one of the things that we're seeing is this type of theft, if they do get busted, that misdemeanor sentence is 180 days. And a lot of these offenders are into their double digits actually on their offense. 10, 12, 14 times they've been popped for this, and they get a little slap on the wrist and they go right back to making money. There's been some concerns about what kind of solution can we bring to this. And what's been brought forward is after 5 offenses, 5 convictions, on the 5th conviction, that prosecutor has the discretion to bump that to a felony. And that felony would carry the appropriate felony what do you want to call them? Consequences of up to 10 years in jail or a $10,000 fine. That's a discretionary thing by the part of the prosecutor. There's been concerns. Does this? What about our youth when they at 14 years old go down and lift something out of the store? When that happens, when they turn 18, those records, I believe, are expunged. They don't go forward on this. This is for adults only. So this is solution-based legislation based on a problem that's out there without stiffer penalties. We just continue down the same road we're on. So the bill itself is pretty straight up. It adds 1 paragraph. Any person convicted of a 5th or subsequent offense of theft, shoplifting, larceny, wrongful disposal of property, livestock rustling, or any other types of offenses, shall be guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment of not more than 10 years and a fine of not more than $10,000 or both, with an effective date of July 1, 23. So let's stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator Cooper. Questions for Senator Cooper? Snacks? Nap? No? Senator Case?
Madam Chairwoman, I've had a little bit of trouble with this bill, and it's a very big step to go up to a 10-year felony, and for theft. And theft is a problem in my community and in a community that you used to live in before. I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I agree that the jail time doesn't seem to be a deterrent for these repeat offenders. But I'm kind of searching for a better way. It's, each individual instance, and I agree also, Madam Chairwoman, that probably the times you're caught, you probably got away with it maybe 10 times for each time you're caught, maybe. So it's a real pattern of behavior, but the amounts, although they're multiple, they're pretty small. It's pretty hard to get too much out of a grocery store with one experience, you know? So I still need some assurance on this bill, and I did vote for it in committee, and it's been proposed by a retailer in my neck of the woods that I respect greatly. They're pillars of the community, and they're getting creamed by shoplifting. So I need some more assurance on this bill, though.
Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. Appreciate the words from the good senator from Fremont. You know, we had some great testimony on this bill, and he's right. It's not a slam dunk what we're doing here. But it's kind of like the proponents of the bill said in testimony in the committee. We're to a point in our criminal justice system, frankly, where we need to put some more teeth in there. We got a visit from the gentleman who heads up the small business group here in the capital city. He was very enthusiastically for this bill, and he explained that, you know, you hear nationwide about these theft rings that are hammering our box stores, and you think of the big box stores, or maybe even the corner drugstore where you go to buy your nasal spray. That's what you think of, but the mom and pops are getting hammered by this kind of thing, and it doesn't take very much. When you consider that a mom and pop store might sell, say, 40 transactions in a day, if they lose even one or two of those transactions that walk out the door, it can really impact our small business. So we talked about that. We talked about you know, how organized this has become, and how many of the stores have taught their employees, don't put yourself in jeopardy. Just get out of the way, let people go. Well, guess what message that sends to the perpetrators? They know that they aren't going to get stopped. We need to do something. Keep in mind that, and the chairman knows better than any of us, that you're going to take this to circuit court, and you're going to have to prepare to go in front of the judge and prepare for a court appearance, and you're not going to do that in a frivolous manner. It's going to have to be a case that our prosecutors out across the state feel like deserves the consideration of this felony penalty. So it's not an automatic, and it certainly isn't a mandatory thing. This is up to, and it's something that gives some discretion, you know, to our judicial system. So I hope that helps. That's just a few bullet points, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lander. Further discussion? Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, I noticed the bill includes livestock rustling. And Madam Chairman, I'm a little unclear as to why that's there, because I think typically the livestock rustling is a felony of that magnitude for the first offense. And it frankly should be, because it's a very dangerous thing, because a lot of it's done with high-powered rifles out after one cow to butcher, and very dangerous thing to come across. So why is that repeated here? All the discussion I've heard is in terms of small merchants, but it looks like it's capturing more than that.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think the good senator from Natrona County did hit on a thing, because that's actually one of the carve-outs under this, and it is, I will note, firearm actually is included in that. It's always going to be a felony. Horse, mule, sheep, cattle, buffalo, swine, regardless of value. So livestock may actually not be as inclusive as it needs to be, because I don't see yak in that list, Madam Chairman. But my question, Madam Chairman, is actually to the 5 times, because if I do this bill actually does not specify misdemeanant. I think we're talking about misdemeanors, but it actually does not say that under the same 402. But if I sum that up, 750 times 5, they would have paid $3,750 worth of fines if they were fined at the maximum amount, and they would have 2 years, up to 2.5 years worth of imprisonment. So my question is, are we actually not getting sentencing for these crimes, these first 5 crimes? If that's part of the problem, then maybe we need a different degradation for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, till you get to the 5th one. Because it seems like if you're stealing something that's $5 and on your 5th one, now you're a felon, that doesn't, I guess I'm finding a bit of a disconnect in that. Understanding that there's a real problem, but is that problem in the prosecution and the sentencing side of it, or is it in something else? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Further discussion? Senator Case.
I'm not able to answer all those questions, and I'm not even sure what I think about this, but testimony was a lot of these people go to court, they are convicted, they do their time, and then the next week they do it again. You know, they spend a few days in jail, they may have fines that they pay or are unable to pay, but they are convicted of the earlier offenses and they suffer consequences from that. But the argument is that's just not enough.
Further discussion? Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, further question. If, say, a young adult individual goes on one crime spree and in the same day or two steals from 5 different stores, will all those add together to be the 5th offense, and that one spree causes the felony, or is there it has to be a previous conviction and not just a whole series of convictions essentially all at once?
Senator Case.
And Madam Chairwoman, you know I'm not a lawyer, and I don't even play one on TV, but I can imagine that circumstance, and sure they have separate offenses, but it would come to the prosecuting attorney's office, and they're not going to file separate. I mean, it'd be consolidated in one thing. I mean, the court's not going to handle having all those separate proceedings. So it would be consolidated. Might be different instances, but I'm sure that just one impact for the purpose of this bill. And I stand corrected whenever the good chairwoman gets out of that chair on second reading.
Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And I do appreciate the good questions. I would take you to line 8 on page 2, separately brought and tried on these. And just the reminder, there is discretion that can be used, by our law enforcement and by our judiciary branch on this. This is not an automatic that just goes to trial, and it's not an automatic that these individuals will be sentenced to the 10 years. That's the high bar, but it does allow for the fact that our law enforcement and our prosecutors out there can let it be known that we're not going to tolerate all of this repeat offense that's been going on. This is an area of the world, by the way, fellow senators, I think you'll hear more about this. I'm not sure that this will be, for example, an interim topic for us here in Wyoming, but it'll certainly be in the headlines as we go forward. Theft is a very big deal right now, and we've got some small business owners in the room. I bet they can tell you all about it. But I think this is at least a start. We'll work it as we go through. I frankly am not sure. Nothing came up about the reference to livestock rustling, but we'll sure look into that, and I'll try to get an answer for second reading.
Further discussion? Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Landon's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the due pass recommendation of House Bill 112, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. House Bill 112 has passed the committee of the whole. Good senators, I'll take privilege of the floor. You have behind you our former interim Secretary of State, Carl Allred, joining us behind you up in the gallery. A warm Senate welcome to Mr. Allred. And privilege of the floor to Senator Larson.
Yes, please, privilege.
Yes.
I also would like to introduce a past House member, if he's still there. He's over this way somewhere, Alan Yagi. Oh, there he is, Alan. Maybe we could have a couple words from him.
Mr. Yagi, you can have my mic right there, or Ms. Steinmetz's, Senator Steinmetz.
Oh, for your Senate President, good hunting in your place. Enjoy that. Supplemental budget is on my mind as I watch all of you go through all the things you do. I had a bill when I was here that said we would only spend for emergency in a non-budget year. And as I kind of watch what you guys are doing, we're up to, what, 37 million now? I'm not sure I'd agree, so you know how I'd be voting. But I do appreciate your service, your giving up your spare time. I was here 10 years, so I know a little bit about what's going on, but I appreciate you guys hanging in there and trying to make our state a better place, so thank you.
All right, with that, good senators, our next bill for consideration is House Bill 10.
House Bill 10 engrossed. County officers' bond amounts and surety requirements, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, an act relating to county officers. Was referred to Committee Number 6, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Grew, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 10 do pass. And with that, I apparently am the chosen one to give this bill a little heads up. This bill was worked by the Joint Judiciary Committee during the interim. It was a result of a county official somewhere in our state, I'm not sure where, who embezzled a large amount of government funds. The bond amounts that are presently required for our county officials are very small in comparison to many other states. So this bill brings the amount from $10,000 to $100,000 for the majority of our county officials. There were a couple of exceptions. The county surveyor and the county commissioners will only go from $1,000 to $10,000 because they don't handle any funds or money. These amounts are more in line with the other states. Hearing testimony this morning, we heard that there actually is one state, I'm pretty sure it's one that's in the far west, that require their county clerks to have a $5 million bond. But we are very much in line with these changes with the states around us. And on just a side note, these are bond amounts. Some of these were set at statehood, and they definitely needed to be updated based on the responsibilities of our county officials and the large amount of money that they deal with. The other part of the bill, if you want to take a look at page 2, they changed the word sureties to surety on line 16. And the big deal there was in some of our smaller communities, it's difficult to find bonding companies. And so this basically just helps us to only have to require one. And just so you know, a surety bond comes from a bonding company, and they take responsibility and guarantee that the performance or obligations of the person or company that's required, they take that on when they have these bonds. And that's pretty much the entirety of the bill. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to give it a shot. It's effective July 1st, 2023. Some of the folks maybe on the interim Judiciary Committee might have more information than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schuler. Questions for Senator Schuler? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it do so with the do pass recommendation of House Bill 10, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 10 is passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 12.
House Bill 12, Presumptive Child Support Amounts Updated Tables, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, an act relating to child support, was referred to Committee Number 6, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ellis, ayes. Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Guru, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I bring you House Bill HB 12, Presumptive Child Support Amounts Updated Tables. Again, this is another one of those joint judiciary committee bills that I'm sure was worked pretty hard during the interim. House Bill 12 is really just an act that basically amends the child support amounts. It's something that is required that we take a look at every 4 years, and we try to look to see if the amounts are uniform. There is a committee within the Department of Family Services who meets, and we heard a little bit about the committee. I think there's 9 of them. They represent a variety of backgrounds. The committee also includes an economist, and I think this is probably the real prime person, and this economist brings in all kinds of information on inflation, income, housing prices, wages, and so forth, to determine if our rates are in line with regional data and surrounding states. And so these tables are really they also consider the combined income of both the parents, the number of children, and all of these other factors that I just mentioned, and then they determine the obligation based on that data provided from the committee. So these tables, if you want to take a look at them, they've taken into account all of that data, and the data that we heard from the economist was from 2013 to 2019. And that's pretty much, again, the gist of that bill. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for Senator Schuler? Seeing none. Senator McEwen?
I guess I'll be the guy that asks the question. At what point in time does this quit being a graduated scale? If a spouse's net monthly income is $1 million a month, doesn't it seem like 14.4% plus 10.3% of everything over is kind of hitting the ball out of the park and getting a bit excessive? And I asked this question because I had a couple divorce attorneys question me on this. So I'm just wondering, did we ever think about capping this at all? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Nethercott?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just help out the good members of the Travel Committee from the Joint Judiciary Committee from the interim. This is a requirement that the state is required to do as part of a federal law associated with child support guidelines. And so they do go up and they do go down. So you may recall a couple of years ago, we did change the tables, which did reduce the general child support presumptive amount obligation. But it is based on a requirement of federal law that we annually, or I think it's every 5 or every 4 years, are required to review it. And this is the result of that. I think it's been at least 6 years since those have been raised in any way that would cause a hardship. And as we certainly know, the cost of everything is increasing, including that for children. And so again, that's the purpose of the bill. And the reason why we heard it was really as a requirement by the state to check those federal law requirements to review periodically our child support payments or tables.
Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none? Oh, did someone? All righty, seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 12, please say aye. Aye. My apologies. House Bill, let's do it again. All those in favor of Senator Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a recommendation of House Bill 12, say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The bill is passed Committee of the Whole.
The next bill for your consideration is House Bill 45.
House Bill 45, Peace Officer Retirement and Rehiring, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to administration of the government, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, and Pappas. No, Senator Kolb. Senator Boner, Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation, House Bill 45. And explain the bill, I refer to my colleague from Albany County.
Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill is going to sound a little familiar to you because we passed before a bill regarding our Highway Patrol, Game and Fish, DCI, and they have a separate retirement plan than police officers, sheriffs, etc. So what the Highway Patrol is asking is they would like to be able to rehire some of their retired troopers, etc. But under our current statutes, they can't do that. Whereas police department, sheriffs can do that. So if you look at the bill, that's basically what we're talking about, is allowing the rehiring, as it's noted on line 2 of page 1, allowing rehiring of persons who have retired under the Highway Patrol, Game and Fish, DCI, and dealing with their retirement act. So it's a short bill, but the real key is, if you look on page 2, line 12, and I'll get to 8 in a second, but line 12 repeals 93607D. What D says, you have to retire at age 65. That's what our statutes say. So this bill is repealing that and then allowing on line 8 of page 2, rehiring an employee retired under this article, and it already defines in our statutes what happens to retirement plans, etc., if you rehire a retired employee. So that's what they want to do. As we talked before, there's a big shortage of troopers, and as we heard the other day, DCI people, so they want to rehire these. Now, what they talked about is these individuals over 65 probably will not be out there in a car on the highways, but they can use them to do investigations and instruction, etc., which frees up other troopers. So, Madam Chair, we'll stop there and try to answer any questions. I move approval of this bill. I guess Senator Boner already did that, yeah.
It is. Thank you, Senator Furphy. Questions for Senator Furphy? Senator Hutchings.
Madam Chair, just like to know, is this going to be kind of like a double dipping thing where someone has retired, they're getting their retirement pay, and they'll be getting state pay as well? And then if they're getting state pay as a civilian, will that also be going toward their retirement as well? Thank you.
Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's already defined in our statutes, that it explains clearly, if you go back to work after you've been retired, how they look at our actuarial tables, and they define that clearly in our statute, what happens. So there is some benefit to the individual going back, but they don't really get double retirement. I hope that answers the question.
Further questions? Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, Do so with the do pass recommendation of House Bill 45, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. House Bill 45 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for your consideration is House Bill 39.
House Bill 39, verifying the veteran designation on a Wyoming driver's license, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to motor vehicles, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation. Excuse me. House Bill 39. Call Senator Kolb.
Senator Kolb.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I hope I don't get out of breath. This is a simple little bill. It changes the documentation that you'll need to get authorization to have a veteran's designation on your license. The meat of the bill is on page 2, lines 3, 4, and 5, and it strikes out certification by the Wyoming Veterans Commission and inserts documentation issued by the Armed Forces of the United States. I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Questions for Senator Kolb? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the do pass recommendation of House Bill 39, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. House Bill 39 is passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for your consideration is House Bill 41. Senator
House Bill 41 engrossed, lightweight trailers permanent registration, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to motor vehicles, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation. House Bill 41. There is a standing committee amendment. I ask that that be read at this time.
House Bill 41, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 10 after.
I move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 41. And for the explanation of the bill and the Standing Committee Amendment, I refer to my colleague from Laramie County.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This bill was a work of your Joint Transportation, Highway, and Military Affairs Committee. This bill basically provides for the permanent registration of specified trailers, and that's trailers under 1,000 pounds. So we're talking about small trailers. It provides an exemption for those permanently registered trailers so that they won't pay any registration fees after they're permanently registered. And then it also specifies requirements for transfer of ownership. So let me get into the meat of the bill, which is on page 2. If you'll see down on lines 17 through 22, the owner of this trailer, as defined in the subsection you see there, and that's what defines the size of the trailer, may permanently register the trailer upon payment of a fee in the amount of $500 at the time of initial registration. And we do have an amendment that will change that, but for now it's $500 under this bill. Alternately, the fees under this section, oh, excuse me, that's part of the amendment. Under the fees of this section, if you don't pay for that one-time fee, then there's another way that you can pay it, and that's if you look at section O on page 3. Again, it issues a distinctive license plate indicating the permanent registration. It's not subject to additional registration for as long as the owner owns the trailer. And if the one-time fee in the amount of $500 is not paid at the initial time, this paragraph kicks in, and you'll see on the next page what those requirements are. In Romanet I, a permanent registration fee, state fee in the amount of $50, and then in Romanet II, an amount equal to 5 times the applicable fees, plus donation amounts that you may donate for various things like, donating to wildlife funds, etc. And it also says that if you're going to pay the 5 times fee to get the permanent plate, you can only, the donated amount doesn't have to be 5 times. So you can donate the donated amount only once. Then if you look further on, paragraph P, line 11 through 16, you have to display the permanent plate, but you could only display it on the registered trailer, except when transferred pursuant to paragraph E that we'll see on the next page. If you look at lines 18 through 23, the permanent registration shall not be transferred to a new owner, okay? So this is only as long as you own the trailer yourself. If you see a line on 22, the new owner shall be subject to all applicable titles, registration, and license fees. So if you become the new owner, then if you come, it all becomes like you have to register it again from scratch, okay? Then if you look at the next page, page 5, this is the where we're line. You'll see line 7. We've included E there, and E is at the bottom of the page. Line 21. Upon transfer ownership of the trailer that has been permanently registered, the permanent registration of the trailer expires, and the original owner on the next page immediately removes the plate from the trailer. However, within 60 days after transfer of ownership, the original owner acquires another trailer for which the permanent license would be proper. The owner may file an application for transfer. So you have 60 days and you can transfer it to a new trailer. So there was a fairly large amendment. I had asked to move amendment number 1, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to.
It's been read and moved in, Senator.
I'm moving it, ma'am.
It has been moved.
Who moved it?
Your chairman, Senator Boner.
Did you move it? Oh, okay. I didn't hear that. So I apologize.
I got it.
Thank you. So while you can see the lengthy amendment, most of this are some technical corrections. Certainly, all of the information you see there on lines 1 or page 1, lines 10, 11, 12 are inserting new numbers because we're going to be inserting a couple of paragraphs in the back, which I'll get to. Lines 8 through, or I guess 8 through 10, again, inserts the language on page 2 that reads, except for a trailer that is mobile equipment. So we're just making that exception to, that this will affect all these light trailers except for mobile equipment. Your amendment, line 11 through 13, inserts a provision that makes it subject to paragraphs Romanet 3 and Romanet 1 and Romanet 3 of this subsection. And you'll see those Romanets on page 3, lines 1 and 2 and lines 6 and 7. So all that change would make paragraph N read like this: except for a trailer that is mobile equipment, the owner of the trailer, as defined in Wyoming Statute 31-101A, Romanet 23, and subject to the provisions of paragraphs Romanet I and Romanet 1 and Romanet 3 of this subsection, may permanently register the trailer upon payment of a fee in the amount of $500 at the time of initial registration. Alternately, the owner may permanently register the trailer by paying the fees under subsection O of this section. So basically, all that, everything from 1 through 16 on your amendment takes care of that. If you go on page 3, line 10, basically we just have technical corrections. Those little A's in brackets should have been N, so it should have been paragraph N. So that's just a technical correction. The bulk of the amendment is what you see there on line 25. We're inserting a new paragraph here because we just need to add one word. So if you look at that word, the department may issue license plates except permanent. Okay, it used to be just dealer and antique motor license plates. Those are the ones that are permanent now. And now that we're making a permanent trailer plate, we're just adding the word permanent in there. And then we are adding another subsection, and that's on page 6, the end of the, pretty much at the end of the bill. On line 21, we're inserting 31.3.103, distribution of fees. And all this paragraph does is define that 50% of the permanent registration fees will be collected and distributed to the county, and the other 50% will be to the state. So with that, I ask for your favorable consideration on the amendment.
Discussion on the amendment? Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Boner's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 41, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 41 has been adopted. Back on the bill, Senator Pappas.
Madam Chairwoman, we have a Committee of the Whole amendment, and I would yield to the sponsor of that amendment to explain it.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Senator Brennan. Can we have that Committee of the Whole amendment read in?
House Bill 41, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 2, line 19, delete.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you. I would like to withdraw this amendment. I've gotten some new information since we've been sitting here and come back with a second reading amendment.
That amendment has been withdrawn. Back on the bill. Further discussion on the bill? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we're tired, but here we are doing our job. I have some friends that are really fanatical about their license plate numbers. And so I am a little curious if somebody has like a really cool number, a significant number, if they just then get that for all time, and that, like, when does that ever release? And so for those license plates enthusiasts, this is a very critical question.
There's anxiety out there in the public. Who can answer those questions? Senator Pappas?
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, I'm actually not sure how trailer license plates are licensed. I'll ask the department and I'll come back with that. They are smaller plates. They're not your typical license plates. I don't believe they even have the bucking horse on it. And I don't know how they're numbered and whether there's a specialty plate in a trailer plate. I don't know, but I'll get that information and bring it back on second reading.
We shall wait with anticipation. Further questions on the bill? Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the do pass recommendation of House Bill 41, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. House Bill 41 is passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for your consideration is House Bill 47.
House Bill 47, Election Equipment Federal Certification, sponsored by the Corporations Committee, an act related to elections, was referred to Committee Number 7, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a do pass recommendation on House Bill 47, Election Equipment Federal Certification. And Madam Chairwoman, there is a standing committee amendment. I'd ask that it be read in at this time.
House Bill 47, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 6, lines 10 through 15, delete.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Madam Chairwoman, this is a bill that was a product of your interim Corporations Committee work. It has made its journey from our friends down the hall, and they added quite a bit more detail, not all of which we agreed with, Madam Chairwoman. But the gist of it is we're codifying rules within the Secretary of State's office about certification of election equipment. And so there is a process by which election equipment gets a federal certification. There's a particular way they achieve that standard, and that has never been in our law. And this is, we're making it a rule, or we're taking what was a rule and codifying it. And this is an election integrity bill, Madam Chairwoman, to really codify this federal election certification requirement. Our friends down the hall added a little bit more detail from the rules to the bill, and that's why you have a nice green bill. And they, for the most part, your committee agreed with the work they did, but there were two areas where we did not, and that's the subject of the Standing Committee Amendment, Madam Chairwoman. And the two areas, and I'll just cut to the chase because it's getting kind of late, but on page 6 and page 7, page 6, lines 10 through 15, this came from our friends, of course. It says, Romanet 3, upon written request of the Secretary of State, the vendor fails to submit the electronic voting system for re-examination by a voting system test laboratory certified by the United States Election Assistance Commission or National Institute of Standards and Technology. And Madam Chairman, this is a list of ways that we lose the federal certification or lose recognition of the federal certification in Wyoming. And you can see the first list, it starts, I should have backed up, it starts on page 5, line 16. The Secretary of State may deny an application for certification of an electric voting system as required by subsection D of this section, or withdraw certification of an electronic voting system for any of the following reasons. Romanet 1, county clerk notifies the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State determines that the electronic voting system fails to meet the requirements. Romanet 2, the vendor fails to notify the Secretary of State of necessary enhancements or adjustments to the electronic voting system. Romanet 3 is the one we just read. Romanet 4, the election voting system does not produce accurate results and reports as required by law. 5, changes are made in the electronic voting system that do not comply with the requirements for certification. Romanet 6, the electronic voting system is no longer used by any county in Wyoming or is no longer available for purchase or repair from the company. And finally, we're getting back to Romanets 7 and Romanets 8. These are also the subject of the Standing Committee Amendment, which we propose to remove the next two requirements. Romanet 7, Madam Chairwoman, is that the electronic voting system vendor or its employees are found by the Secretary of State to be problematic in ensuring elections as critical infrastructure. And then Romanet 8 is failure to comply with any other rule of the Secretary of State. So I guess, Madam Chairwoman, the bottom line is what we did here is our clerks and everybody's really concerned about integrity of election systems, but it's an important cooperative system. And they felt, and the committee felt, as well as the testimony in committee, was that having it be able to be decertified and rejected based on anything perhaps that strays a bit from the founding principles of the other elements, but in Romanet 3, Romanet 7, and Romanet 8, that those are all a bit too discretionary, if I may say, Madam Chairwoman, and that we remove that discretion because it was considered, it wasn't necessarily black or white. There was always the possibility that an election could be troubled or disturbed by allegations coming late in the game about election equipment. So this brings it back to the requirements that are really more in tune with the rules that exist at the Secretary of State's office. I hope that was helpful. That's what the Standing Committee Amendment does. That's what the bill does. Happy to take it further, Madam Chairwoman.
Questions on the amendment? Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Case's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 47, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 47 has been adopted. Looks like there is a Committee of the Whole amendment, Senator Case.
There sure is, Madam Chairwoman, except for I don't have it right in front of me. Do one of my good friends have it handy? So you can always count on Senator Boner. He's always got it. So there's a place in the bill where it says County A, and it should be A County. And what exactly line number is that, Madam Chairwoman?
I think it's page 7, line 15.
That's exactly what I was trying to get at. And so, as you can see, this is a substantial change to this bill, and to go from County A to A County. Last time I checked, our counties have, let's have it read in.
Let's do that, but
Let's do
excellent
that.
explanation. Let's have that read in. Thank you.
House Bill 47, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to a gross copy, page 7, line 15, delete.
And we'll move it now.
You know, I'd really like to move this amendment, the Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 47. This was brought to us by our noble attorneys who found this catch, and I think it changes everything. You'll go from County A instead of, county. We use numbers for our counties, so switching to letters is a bad idea in the middle of a legislative session. So we'll go from County A to A County. Call for the question.
Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Case's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 47, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 47 has been adopted. Back on the bill. Discussion on the bill. Question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Case's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it do so with the due pass recommendation of House Bill 47, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. House Bill 47 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
Madam Chairman, I move the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, let's finish it up. Reading clerk will read the Committee of the Whole report.
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 24 engrossed, do pass amended. House Bill 50, do pass. House Bill 69 engrossed, do pass amended. House Bill 111 engrossed, do pass. House Bill 104 engrossed, do pass amended. House Bill 51, do pass. House Bill 61 engrossed was re-referred to Committee Number 2. House Bill 35, do pass amended. House Bill 97 engrossed, do pass. House Bill 29, do pass. House Bill 28 engrossed, do pass. House Bill 82, do pass amended. House Bill 112 engrossed, do pass. House Bill 10 engrossed, do pass. House Bill 12 engrossed, do pass. House Bill 45, do pass. House Bill 39, do pass. House Bill 41 engrossed, do pass amended. House Bill 47 engrossed, do pass amended. Senator Nethercott, Chairman.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. President, I move for adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion carried and the report is adopted. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, February the 8th.
Any announcements? Senator Scott.
Mr. President, your Committee Number 4, Education, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in room W110 downstairs. House Bill 26, School Facilities Appropriations. House Bill 70, Definition of Home-Based Education Program.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee, Labor, Health, and Social Services, Committee 10, will meet at 7:30 a.m. tomorrow morning in room 6 and online to hear House Bill 172, Evidence Preservation, House Bill 119, medical prescriptions, off-label purposes, and House Bill 65, 988, suicide prevention.
Senator Tinsky.
Your committee number 2 appropriations will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, February 8th at 8 a.m. in the appropriations room E301 to consider HB 14 civil case filing fees amendments, HB 64 legislative stabilization reserve account obligations, HB 52 revisers bill, HB 286 ETS consolidation if introduced and time permits.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet up at 5:45 tonight in room W2 and online to consider the following bills: House Bill 93, Omnibus Water Bill Construction, House Bill 16, State Land Leasing Improvements, and House Bill 20, Land Exchanges Notice.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. The number 1 Judiciary Committee will meet tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. in Capitol Extension Room W04 and online. We will consider House Bill 0009 engrossed, Juvenile Courts Concurrent Jurisdiction Clarification, and time permitting, House Bill 0013, Office of Guardian Ad Litem Program References.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources will meet Thursday at 8 o'clock in W2 and online to hear 3 bills: HB 15, County Authority to Dissolve Museum Boards Clarification, HB 126, Trespass, Removal of Trespasser, HB 147, Unlawful Trespass Signage, Taking of Wildlife.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, will meet tomorrow, February 8th, upon adjournment in Capitol Extension Room W2 and online to consider House Bill 57, Armed Forces Amendments, House Bill 160 engrossed, Driver's License Veterans Designation replacing DD Form 214.
Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
Mr. President, the Republicans will be caucusing at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning in room 113. 9:30.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, 2/8/2023. Don't forget